It says now that we have gone live. So, Board President Golick, you are live on the interwebs.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go ahead and call the July 9th meeting to order. Just before we get started, this meeting is being held via Zoom and YouTube per Executive Order N29-20, which authorizes local legislative bodies to hold public meetings via teleconference and to make public meetings accessible telephonically or otherwise electronically to all members of the public. Members of the public are encouraged to observe and participate in this meeting. If you bring up our agenda, you can see how to do that. But the quickest way at this point is to please send an email to admin@westlakecharter.com. Limit that email to 250 words or less, and we'll do our best to make every effort to read your comment as part of the record. But if anything is received after an item, we will go ahead and include that for board members. So with that, I will go on with our meeting and kick off celebrations.
Do you want me to take roll first?
Sure, you can, or we could do it with the first vote.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hope?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Oops. Okay. Hi. Nancy?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Michelle?
Am I off mute? Hi, everyone. I'm here.
Vasa?
Yes.
Ashley? Uh-oh. I thought I saw her.
Oh, she's here. Ashley, I think you're muted. Ashley Patel, you here?
Sorry, I saw her lips moving but didn't know who she was saying. Here.
Cool. Shannon?
Here.
And Jed?
Here.
Yay.
Okay. So celebrations. I'm going to go in the grid on my screen and start with Shannon. If that's okay, Shannon. That was bad timing. And you're muted.
Oh.
It's like when the waiter comes around your table and asks you. Okay.
Yeah.
I know. She's laughing. There.
Sorry. I was saying my dog was just batting at the door, so I was like, I'll turn on my camera real quick, and then I heard my name. I was like, nope, okay, I'm going to come back. Okay, I will start. I'm going to celebrate just that I am actually, this is just a personal celebration. I am leaving my home in Sacramento for the first time in like however many months next week, and I am very excited to get some fresh air and some nature and a change of scenery. And so I'm just, celebrating a chance to finally leave this house.
Yay. Michelle, then Ashley.
A personal celebration. We did a virtual baby shower for my sister who is carrying twins, and it's her very first set of kids. So COVID did not disrupt the baby shower fully, and we learned how to do something new.
That's great.
Fun.
Ashley, then Jed.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties, but I turned this headphones off, so we'll see if that cures it. Hi, everybody. I will celebrate kind of an embedded in two things in one. Just the amazing resiliency of kids. We took Aiden. It's been, so Sunday will have been 10 weeks since his accident, and we took him to Yosemite, and he did a few mini hikes and climbed some large rocks and boulders and parkoured with his brother. And so there was some nervousness and worriness, but we had a great 3 days away and just kind of blown away. Didn't think we'd be here at this point. Thought this would be a year from now. So hopefully that's what we experience in August with all of our babies. Kids kind of amaze me, and that's why I'm in this profession.
It's great. It's great.
Okay, Jed, then Josh.
Celebrating John Ike responding to texts at 6:15 in the morning.
Always glad to respond to a text.
I know, I get up early now, and I always say I'm keeping Ike hours. Yeah. Josh, then Vasa.
Well, I'm going to celebrate, kind of piggybacking on Shannon's, just getting out a little bit. The kids are up with their grandparents this weekend, and for the first time in 3.5 months, they're not my sole responsibility. So, and I think they appreciate that far more than we do. So they're loving it.
Vasa, then Nancy.
Hey everyone, good to be here. I celebrate a couple of things. I want to celebrate two things. First, that parent handbook that is in the works is just absolutely amazing. I just combed through it today. The thoughtfulness, the thoroughness, and the planning that went into that is pretty epic, and I'm just proud of that document. And then also personal celebration. I've been working on my dissertation, and I have a rough draft of my lit review, which is kind of a big daunting task of a dissertation. So it's a pretty sloppy rough draft, but at least I have some pages written.
Yeah, as I've mentioned before, I don't like starting things, so go Vasa. Nancy, then Amy, if you want to play.
Sorry, I was getting ready to unmute, and I was ready, and then the little thing disappeared that I couldn't unmute, so apologies for that. So two things as well. Just going through, piggyback on Vasa's comment about this parent handbook. I think that there's just so much, and I know that we'll go into in-depth later on it, and but just knowing how in the news right now the return to school is, that it makes me feel really good that we have a very thoughtful process, and having nothing to do with it, it just makes me feel good to be part of that organization that you guys have put together this amazing document. So I feel prepared and excited about that, and then just personally, I think being able to see more people take precautions about going out, and and just being more mindful has been really good, and it has felt kind of normal. We had dinner last night, and bunches of people were outside eating, and it felt like a normal summer evening. So as normal as it can be. So I'm celebrating a little bit of normalcy.
Thanks, Nancy. Amy?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'm wearing, one of our fourth graders made this design on this hat and is selling them. He's got hats and t-shirts, and they're on Instagram, and it's the best, and it just kind of reminds me of multiple things. It reminds me to keep things into perspective and keep my stress level at a 0, and it also reminds me that there are kids waiting to see us, and I can't wait to see them. And so this is my favorite hat right now. There you go, stress level 0.
I need one of those. Steve is on. Steve, did you want to play?
I'm here. Let me turn on the camera. And there. Hey. Yeah, so as folks had commented about getting away, I guess I would celebrate we actually got to go away for a day up to Desolation Wilderness up 50. And just the four of us, our family, went up there and hiked around a little bit. And it was, up the hill by 9 and back by 3-ish. But it was just really great to get away for a little bit of time. And it's beautiful up there. So if you can get up there and socially distance and wear a mask, I would highly recommend it.
And then I see Emily on. Emily, do you want to celebrate?
I will never pass up a moment to celebrate. I will celebrate for sure. So I'm like, let me in. I'm just going to celebrate our amazing leadership team. I think it probably was celebrated at our last board meeting in June, but our leadership team, school year ended beginning of June, end of May, and this team of teachers has come together Tuesdays at 2 and has just done some extraordinary work. So we look at that family handbook that's being produced now, and so much of the work and thoughtfulness that they put in has produced this document for both our staff and our families. And I've got a lot of colleagues in the industry who are like where we all are in this place of like, let's answer questions, let's get some answers to the big questions. But I see our school just chipping away one piece at a time, and I'm so proud of our teachers for continuing to be part of that work.
Sean, did I skip you? I feel like you're like dicing out my screen. Did you celebrate yet?
I didn't, but that's okay. I was having trouble deciding.
Well, there you have. You had time. It is now your turn to celebrate away.
Okay. All right, I'm going to be frivolous. I'm going to celebrate our amazing forethought, my family's amazing forethought to put in a pool 4 years ago, because that means we can go swimming, whereas those who have to rely on the Natomas Park Club or who, whatever, like a gym or whatever, they may not be able to, but we've been able to socially distance our pool.
That's good.
Yeah, my husband used our pool at Natomas Park, and it was just for walking. He was the only person swimming, which was a little odd, and it was 87 degrees, so a little warm. Amy, just to know real fast, Ashley popped out. I'm sure she's going to pop back. Okay. Which brings it to me to celebrate. So I think I'd like to celebrate our community, our parent community. I mean, there's like Amy's hat, right? There's a lot of stress and anxiety over the start of the year. And the people I talk to and the things I see, I've just really appreciated to see the support of what the team is doing, of the work that's going on, and the trust that's there. And so I'm really thankful to the community for allowing the time for the work to get done, and then being open to the messaging and the choices that are being made to protect everybody's safety, from students to families to staff to really everyone around us. And so I just wanted to take a moment for that. I think I was last, so that would bring us to other board comments. Anyone else have any comments they wish to make? No, my only comment is, and we're going to get to it as part of the reopening plan, but I don't know if everyone has noticed that there is quite a bit of disruption in all the guidance that has been coming out that the schools had to deal with. And so my comment is I just want to, I guess it could have been a celebration, but just acknowledge the conflict that between the CDC and public health and the state, and what can be going on and what can't be going on. And so I just really appreciate the school's ability to roll with it and to do what's right for us. I get teased sometimes for my sprinkle a little Westlake, but I'm really happy that at this point in time we can really be Westlake and do what we need to do for our families. So with that, I will go to public comments. John, did we receive any emails?
We had not, but let me check right now because I have been flashing up on the live YouTube stream a banner that says make a public comment by emailing. Oh, look, we just got one. This is fantastic. Let's take a look. Let me open up this comment. Amy Wells, do I forward this comment to you for the record as well? Okay. I will read this this into the record. It's from S. Kanemo, and the message says, "Our teachers are going to be carrying an incredible load this upcoming year. I would like to know if there will be information that will be made available so the parents can help out somehow when school starts."
Aww.
That is the first public comment. Ms. Golick, I'll see there's another one, but I think that is the only one.
Okay.
Yeah, that is your only comment if you want to respond.
Well, okay, so we're going to get to the Brown Act presentation later. But unfortunately, because certain things aren't on the board's agenda for action, what the board really does is receive comments, and then what we can do with them is advise staff or ask staff to work on different items. So at this point, John, I would just ask that a note be made that there are parents who are interested in assisting their teachers this fall, and so as we find ways for volunteerism, which is there's some of that in the handbook already, that would be great.
Yeah, love it. So received. Thank you.
Thanks. So that will bring us to our reports. Did we have a report from Amber?
Oh, I spoke with Ms. Husted tonight, and she graciously passed and said that her and the WAVE team are working in the background, and then we'll come out at the next meeting with a report on actions that they're taking to help support Westlake and our entire community during this time.
Perfect. That brings us to our second report, which is Charter Impact in Shannon.
So we had a really great meeting last month that really focused on how our role as the Impact Committee and Westlake Charter should be tackling some of the racial injustices and like how to be more anti-racist in our own work and what that looks like kind of throughout. So after a bunch of discussions, we kind of came to the conclusion that we can't be leaders and demonstrate in the community if we don't educate ourselves first. So we're taking at least this month period, we identified like a long list of both books and articles and academic journals and podcasts and YouTube videos and documentaries that we all wanted to watch and read, and we realized we can't do that all in 1 month. So we all kind of decided to pick the thing or the couple things that resonated with us the most and read that or watch them and learn, and then come prepared next month, or this month rather, to report out on that as kind of our starting point for how to even identify where in the strategic plan the racial justice work should come, and if it just should be happening everywhere, and how we rethink that. So exciting things definitely. Exciting things to the strategic plan. Also, minor updates for you all to review, hopefully soon-ish. So.
It's great. It was a great meeting.
Thanks, Gina. I just wanted to acknowledge, since I've gotten a couple texts. Mr. Ike, I didn't purposely skip you for celebrations. I just know they're in your slide. And so I just want to say nothing intentional there.
No, you and I had talked at one point about me moving my celebrations in, so I caught the cue. But I'm glad there's people out there texting you on my behalf. I love it.
People got your back.
Yes.
So with that, Nancy, development did not meet, correct? I am so lost.
No, we have not met since last meeting, so I do not have an update.
Well, not perfect, but you know what I mean. And I'm blinking, and finance too, right, Sean?
We did not meet either, no.
Perfect. And nor did governance. So I could have just let it go to John and his celebrations. That will teach me. So, Mr. Ike, your executive director report.
Well, I will queue up my report. I am live streaming through YouTube, and so as I present my screen to each of you, I'll lose a part of my screen for our YouTube viewers, but I think it's most important that you and our YouTube viewers are able to see the slideshow, so I'll bring that up and make sure that that's all ready to go. As far as getting started, I would like to start with some celebrations while I try and work my technology here. There we go. Present now. A couple of celebrations I'd like to share. One personal, or one set personal, one set professional. Today is my older brother's birthday. I just thought as I woke up this morning, I've got this big board meeting tonight. It's my brother's birthday, so I texted him. I said, "Hey man, I'm gonna celebrate you live on YouTube." I'm sure he's not watching, but if he were, happy birthday to my dear brother Jeff. And then I was like, while I'm on the topic of family, I just like to celebrate my family. My 3 children, Tyler, Johnny, and Abigail, are all doing very well in this crazy time. And my amazing wife, Christina, we've had a really nice summer. And I just want to celebrate my family for all that they're doing to hold each other together during these unusual times. And on the professional side, similar celebration. Hey, the Westlake Charter School team, I know Mrs. Batten already kind of spoke to it, but is like no other. I can't tell you how many people have helped with the lift. This work that you're going to see tonight was certainly not done by one set of hands, but many, many hands, and that includes many people who were not on the clock this summer, but jumped in to help build it. In fact, one volunteer, Amber Husted, you may recognize the name, is at home right now adding Oxford commas to the whole document so that Sean Berman and I can settle an Oxford comma argument. I just feel like everybody pitches in, everybody does together, and teamwork kind of makes the dream work. So Can I get a thumbs up if you can see the board agenda right now? Can you guys see it? Okay, great. And I'll jump over to my slides then. And going to present mode. Got a couple of celebrations. Going to try and keep my report as short as possible tonight because we do have a lengthier reopening schools conversation. Let me see that loads up. Okay. One more thumbs up. You see my slides, everybody? Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, let's dive in and do what we do. I got to celebrate all the dots. We showed you a little map that we were making, that putting dots on the ground. And Jose, our amazing, one of our amazing custodians, been out there with a little stencil spraying dots. This young child out here, that's Steve Corvink, is standing on a dot, and he knows immediately that he's 6 feet away from this dot, this dot, and this dot, and that's going to help us all move across the campus more freely. It's not obnoxious. They're very small, and the color is nice. I feel great about this work and all the hard work that's happening in the hot sun to make that happen, along with Joe Ashman, Melissa Grunholtz, and the whole team that helped put this thing together. Our commitment to tech over the last 6 years is really a celebration of this board. This board 6 years ago really didn't bat an eye when we said, hey, we kind of want to go one-to-one with Google Chromebooks. And some people were like, what's a Chromebook? I mean, really, 6 years ago, Chromebooks were still pretty new. But because we've done the work that we've done over the last 6 years, I think we have some of the most progressive teachers in the region, if not in the state, in the art of teaching with technology. And right now, we have over 1,000 Chromebooks that we own. We have over 30% of them distributed to students currently who kept them for the summer, which really puts us in a strong position for any type of distance learning in the fall. Just all of the, I guess it's kind of like Sean getting a pool 4 years ago. Who knew, right? That 6 years ago we started this one-to-one Chromebook initiative that now more than ever we would need it. I mean, I think I saw, and Steve might chime in, but I saw a number. Elk Grove went and purchased, was it 21,000? 21,000 Chromebooks. If I hit the board tonight with an expenditure like, oh, by the way, I need to buy 21,000 Chromebooks. The forward thinking of this board and all of the participants here who've led to where we are today, it's a real celebration. I'd also like to celebrate our staff's focus on safety. This is the Iono Max mister. It's the state-of-the-art mist that you spray across a classroom so that the disinfectant and sanitation gets in the nooks and crannies of everywhere. And that's one of our amazing staff members, Jose, who's misting the room right now. This is just an example, but everybody's having to learn new techniques and new ways of doing business to meet the current challenges, and I couldn't be more proud of every single person. I look across the entire organization, I haven't met a single person who's like, no, I just want to do things the way I've always done things. Everybody's willing to stretch that rubber band and say, okay, what do we need to do to make this safe for our students, for our staff, for our community, and what do I need to learn? And what's a new technique I need to engage in? So really good stuff right there. Big shout out to Jose, man. That guy's been here all summer. He's working incredibly hard. Just love seeing him on the screen right there. So today we're going to talk about some strategic actions. Very short. I'm going to talk about working with our partners. In our responding or planning for response to COVID-19 preparedness, we've been working with Natomas Charter School. Joe Wood and I have been working together quite a bit. NP3, Tom Rutten, Sean McGuire, the team from NP3, we've been talking weekly. The team from Natomas Unified School District, we've all been sharing information. It's really, I'm not saying it's nice that we're going through a global pandemic, but what I am saying is at a time like this, it's nice to know that partners are willing to work together. We've had an opportunity to work closely with the Sacramento County Public Health Department. We've spoken with Dr. Kasiri individually or with the California Charter School Association's team and really had an opportunity to really work with the people who were making decisions at the county health department. Our work with the Sacramento County Office of Education, Superintendent Gordon has been instrumental in bringing charter leaders together to have meetings, regarding reopening schools, and of course the California Charter School Association and the and the Charter School Development Center. Both those organizations have a very timely information that we're able to use in all the work that we're doing. We have one more area where we're working with partners I want to acknowledge tonight. That's around our facilities use agreement for Westlake Charter School starting in 2020 through 2025. As a board, you may or may not recall that our FUA, our facilities use agreement, was set to expire on June 1st of this year. We started the kind of FUA negotiations conversation with NUSD back in April, but there was so much going on with distance learning and closing schools that we've agreed to stretch the timeline. So in writing, Mrs. Herrera and myself have agreed to complete this work by September 15th, but I feel good that we have a partnership there that's willing to be flexible in such a challenging time. Any questions on those matters? No? Updates tonight. I have several updates, and I won't be giving them all. I'll be talking about board packets. We actually had a comment or a question on that tonight, so it's great to bring this out. Talk about our new fall planning website, enrollment update, a budget update from Mr. Korvink, and a high school planning update from Principal Batten. So we have a couple guest speakers tonight. It'll be fantastic. So I just want to use this update to remind you that as of last year, we moved all of our board packets onto our board website here on the public website. And I thought, well, since we're streaming through YouTube, some of our viewers from home might want to know, if you go to westlakecharter.com and you go on the board drop-down button up there, you can get to our board packets where you can see all the documents that we're going to discuss tonight at the meeting. Also, as board members, you all know, you can go to westlakeweekly.com and use the drop-down menu in the corner to get to our board website. Just an update. Both websites have been updated, so I thought it was appropriate to speak to it tonight. So those are all ready to go for you tonight and for subsequent nights for the rest of the year. Next update is our Return to School Fall 2020 website. Not sure if you saw it in last week's Westlake Weekly, but we had produced a new website so we can have one place for all of our return to school or reopening school in the fall conversation. We put a slider on the home page you can click on, or you can just go up to the WCS tab on our westlakecharter.com, and that'll take you to this new website called Return to School Fall 2020. On the website, we like it because it's a single location. We can put all of our stuff in one place. People will always know where to go. If we're adjusting schedules mid-year, if we're having to make changes and be flexible throughout the year, it'll always be in this one place that everybody will always know where to go to. We'll be doing regular updates, and in tonight's communication, you'll see that there is already a list of dates of when this when this website will be updated, so our families know that pretty much from now until school opening, we're on a weekly update cycle for that website. We recently added to the website from last week to this week a historical sidebar. So if we post a YouTube video this week and then next week we move that video, it'll be on the little sidebar there. And then we also have tonight an updated reopening handbook, which Mr. Lockteff spoke to, and that is already published on the website now. And we also have updated some of the frequently asked questions from last week. And so we'll be doing that on a weekly basis, updating the FAQs, updating the handbook, that handbook that's embedded. Every time it's updated, we'll note it on the website and put it in the handbook. So we'll talk at length about this website tonight, but I wanted the viewers to know this is where we'll be providing that information. Enrollment update. Thanks to Melissa Grunholz for helping me put this together. I thought you guys would like to hear. This is really what we typically talk about in July, but we're so consumed with the pandemic that we don't talk about the normal things. All of our openings have been filled, so we are completely full from kindergarten through 8th grade. Remember, this is the first year ever we've had 4 8th grade classes wide, so we are completely full. Kindergarten through 8th grade. It was a long time coming to get to this day, but this is the largest we've ever been, and at one point, the largest we ever thought we'd be, and now we're opening a high school 1 year from now. But all of our openings have been filled, and our wait list is currently over 1,100, so we're in a very good position right now, meaning the school is full and 1,100 people on the wait list. That's more than we have in the school. I want to talk about 6th grade matriculation because as the board members who've been with the organization for a long time will recall, when I first got here, the middle school was still, launching and kind of getting off the ground. And I remember my first year as the executive director of Westlake Charter School from my Pebblewood office, doing an all call that says, "Good evening, Explorer families. If you know any kids who are in 6th grade and want to come to Westlake Charter School, send them our way," because we couldn't fill 6th grade, the matriculation pattern, which is very natural for the, not having a high school. It was hard to fill that 6th grade. Well, back in 2017, when we moved into this campus, we still had to bring 32 new students into Westlake Charter School to fill 6th grade. In 2018, it went down to 28. In 2019, last year, we've been on this campus for 3 years, we still had 24 new kids to fill out 6th grade. This year, 14 new kids coming into our school. Now, I love new kids. Bring on, but what I love about this number is that it means more students who are enrolled in our 5th grade are saying, sign me up for Westlake Charter School 6th grade, and we hope that it's because they also eventually want to graduate from Westlake Charter School's 12th grade. So that's just really good news right there. It speaks to the health of our organization and our matriculation. Before I jump into budget, any questions about any of the things that I've provided thus far? Did I hear a comment? No? Okay, Steve Corving's going to walk you through a little budget update as part of the executive director's update. Steve, take it away.
Copy. All right, so last week the budget was signed and the associated trailer bills, which kind of define what's in the budget, were inked as well. So just want to give a quick update to the board on the May revise, which is what our budget was built upon, and then the adopt, which was eventually signed. So back in May, we were looking at very significant LCFF cuts up front. We were also looking at some revenue deferrals of only about $1.9 billion from 1920, which was last fiscal year, to 1920 this fiscal year, 2021 this year, and then $3.4 billion from 20 to 21. So the adopted budget, thankfully, if you can click through real quick, does not rely on any LCFF cuts. However, the level of deferrals, and again, the deferrals is, hey, we'll pay you later for the work you're doing today, has increased substantially. In fact, the 1920 deferral essentially doubled to $4.2 billion, and the deferrals going from 2021 to 21-22 jumped up by nearly fourfold to nearly $13 billion. If you can click, John, real quick, just to give you a visual example on what that deferral looks like. At a statewide level, you can see the state kind of pushed what they owed to charters and districts from one fiscal year to the next. It kind of saves them the pain of having to make cuts. And again, you can see here they kind of moved about $4.2 billion from one fiscal year to the next. And again, by itself, okay, you can maybe manage a month or so. But then, John, if you can click once more, you can really see the impact of the deferrals that are coming up between 2021, again, this school year, into 21-22. So starting in February, you'll see money gets deferred all the way into November of the following year. I mean, that is the year we will have high school students on campus. So again, although there were no straight cuts to LCFF, the amount of deferrals increased quite substantially. And so it'll be on districts and charters alike to kind of bear the brunt and manage the cash flow to manage through these upcoming tough times. You do one more click there, John. So some of the other things that were in the budget, the governor proposed in May some increased funding for special education that made its way into the adopted budget. Again, there was a 0% COLA that also made its way into the budget. And then lastly, the governor proposed kind of reducing the STRS and PERS contribution rates for employers, and that made its way into the budget as well. So yeah, the budget came together towards the end of the fiscal year, and we're kind of reading through the trailer bills and seeing what the impacts are, and we'll get a more kind of net effect update here in the coming weeks.
Any questions, thoughts, or concerns for Mr. Corvink regarding the budget update? I see Jed moving. No?
So there's obviously the lock on revenues based upon what your prior year enrollment is. So what's the impact going to be on us here? And we've been talking about having additional kids come into the school, and obviously, you know, that is directly challenged by something like this. So tell us what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, so I know that is in the budget. Yeah, the cap to 1920. Although I know when the governor signed the budget, he asked the legislature to go back and consider changing that. We know at least a few Democrats spoke publicly on the Assembly side of the House as the budget was signed against it, and some Republicans as well. And then you have statewide organizations coming out again pushing back on that. When you look statewide, you've got about a quarter of the districts who are going to be negatively impacted by this. Because they are growing, and they've already, hired the teachers, bought the supplies, bought the furniture, and other things, and they're going to provide services to these students. And then again, you've got a significant number of charters who are growing as well. So it's something that we continue to look at, and we'll kind of dig deeper to it in these upcoming weeks.
But our budget presumes right now that the funding will flow for the kids, or what are we assuming at this point?
Yeah, so the adopted budget assumed the growth at the reduced LCFF rates. So when we revise the budget, we'll revise it to the flat LCFF, and then also include the increased deferrals, and then we'll look at the enrollment piece as well.
And what was our enrollment last year, and what are we budgeted at for this year?
Yeah, so enrollment last year was 975. We ended up with an ADA of 939.93, which is about 96.5 ADA. So again, that ADA, average daily attendance, will get locked in under current proposal into this year.
And what were we expecting to serve? What number of kids were we expecting to serve next year? Under our
into this coming year?
Right.
Sorry, this current year? I think it's 1,040. I have to go back and pull up the budget.
Yeah, with the growth of eighth grade, it takes us right to 1,000, and the increase K3 could take you out to about 1,040.
So we're talking. So if we have 96% of 1,040, we're talking about 1,000 kids, and we're locked right now at what we were last year, which you just said was like 930. So we're talking about serving 70 children and not receiving funding for those 70.
Well, that's presuming 100% ADA on the 1140, right? Or you're saying 1,000 was 96% of 1040. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Got it.
So then, 70 students. We're talking, and whatever it is it what's a nice assumption? 10,000 per student.
No, about 8,800.
So about 9,000. We're talking about 600. A possible hit to the bottom line here of another 620, 630,000. Is that right?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I need to look at it a little bit further since the language is coming out, but yes.
Okay. Well, just starting to look at the scenarios. Okay, we and these deferrals are massive, bigger than we've seen before.
Yes.
We've talked about cash flow previously. We thought that we weren't even going to be getting even through half of our reserve. It was still going to be less than half of our reserve, I think, is what we were talking about consuming. It seems like we're going to be getting close to, or maybe in excess of half of our reserve if we get to the full $12 billion. I don't know. I'm just like ballparking this. But then you throw in another $600,000 cut, and these things are really starting to come quickly. So when you can, I'd love to see what worst case cash flow looks like. Based upon this the state budget for schools that we hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there was an interesting EdSource article recently that talks a little bit about how the deferrals are a little bit more painful this time around than they were last time around, in that the rainy day fund that the governor has drawn down needs to be refilled before the deferrals are essentially paid off. Right. So again, deferrals are just kicking the can down the road. So instead of the governor paying us $1 million this year, well, next year he's got to pay us the $1 million he owes us for that year and this deferred $1 million. So it just becomes more challenging for the state, particularly if you think that the economy is not going to recover anytime soon. And here we are sitting in July. And if July doesn't recover, well, then you're a 12th of the way through the fiscal year. And if that extends a couple months and you're a quarter of the way through the fiscal year and things aren't picking back up, well, then at some point the government may have to come back and either raise taxes or make some additional cuts.
And Steve, just to chime in, I think some of the numbers that we were scratching on, I believe it was $1.36 million in deferrals we thought this year based on the governor's numbers. And if we're sitting on an $8 million reserve, 1.36 plus JED 600 takes you around, potentially $2 million. And you kind of do the math on how many years it would take to get half. About right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be quoted on it quite yet, but that's the ballpark, right?
Yeah.
I would guess.
It's not like we're on YouTube. Don't worry about it.
We're still not really eating through even half of our reserve, though the loss of the revenue for the 7 kids, if that happens, we're never getting that money back, right? So that's a permanent loss to the reserve.
Correct.
Okay.
John,
there are some offsetting potential increases. So I was on a call with CCSA and FICMAT today about the number of things. One of the points that was brought up was the special education funding, and they're trying to look at the language to see kind of what the 3-year rolling average is, and if this year's average is also capped in that calculation. So there's a lot of language that's still getting sorted through. Of course, we've got potential growth funds that come from the Reed Hastings grants and some other pockets that are sitting in there as well. And I mean, our eyes are on all of it right now.
Yeah, just for everyone on the board, literally, daily things are unfolding from school services and FICMAT. I mean, Steve walks in and goes, guess what just came out today? So this is unfolding day by day, and so we're getting more information each day.
John, can I ask one other question?
Sure.
Just I want to make sure I understand, because I've been trying to follow it, but numbers aren't necessarily my best thing.
Sure.
So with the cap, the 70 students Jed's talking about, and given our size restrictions, right, there's really no benefit to increasing class sizes this year, right, as it's currently set up. I get that the legislation could change or other things could happen, but technically the board's goal of doing that, right, is sort of been cut off by the budget.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was my initial reaction as well, because I'm cognizant of class sizes, wanting to make sure that we keep them where we like them. The reality is that there's a couple of ramifications to class size increases that aren't included in that statement. And a few of them include, like, well, if the Reed Hastings money does come through, then there's that. If the governor does peel back and allow for ADA, then we would get that money. The other thing is, if ADA is calculated on last year's numbers, and they're going to do it again next year, then these year's numbers will drive next year. So while we might take the hit this year, it might produce a yield next year, and I don't think anybody's predicting the economy to be amazing next year. So if it benefits us next year, is it worth it this year? And these are certainly not the decision is not made. So luckily the board has said, hey, you can go up to this number, and we are continuing to look at real-time data before we have to make that move. But if we do, there's more factors than just LCFF funding involved, including, like Steve said, do you get the special education funding for each of those students? Do you get the Reed Hastings money, things like that?
Which actually really led to my overall point, right, is just confirming your flexibility as executive director and working with Steve and taking into account all those numbers to still make that decision.
Yeah.
Right. I guess that's really what I wanted to confirm. So it's good to know that we're on the same page.
Yeah. Nancy, you have some audio issues. Can you hear me now, Nancy? Is anybody else having audio issues? Because Nancy just chimed in. Nope. Nancy, you want to refresh your browser or check your Wi-Fi?
One last question: is Natomas Unified a growing enrollment school district?
Is Natomas Unified a growing enrollment school district? Is that what you asked, Jed?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that, Steve.
I think very slightly. Give me a minute, I can come back, and I'll come back on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if we had more allies, right around us who are also really hurting from this or not. So it's not that important. But
Got it.
Yeah, we, I watched the Elk Grove Unified budget meeting because that's what budget wonks do on June 30th. And their superintendent came out during the meeting and said it was going to impact them because they are growing by several hundred students. So, again, you start getting statewide organizations like CCSA, AXA, CASBO, Elk Grove, and large districts saying, hey, the money should follow the students, and hopefully our legislators listen.
Yeah, good stuff. Even if we didn't do class size increases, the 28 new students in 8th grade would certainly benefit from the funding. Are there any more questions from anyone regarding the budget? I have a exciting, we put the budget first because we thought it might have a little doom and gloom in there, although that was a great conversation. Thank you, everybody, for your engagement. But we wanted to welcome to the stage your high school principal, Emily Batten. Emily, Ms. Batten, the applause right there. Walk us through some high school update. I'll work your slides.
Thanks so much, Mr. Ike, and thank you for letting me come tonight. I am so excited to come back. I came to see you all in April and talk a little bit about our work in Q2 and the adjustments we were making as we continue to plan. We were in the middle of distance learning at that point in time and weren't really sure what the next few months would hold. And here we are in July. And so just wanted to come back and share some of the work that has been done from April to July and then talk about the year as a whole so you can really see those next 10 months and how they'll play out and as we get closer to doors opening on our high school. And I say that and my heart starts beating a little bit. So it's so exciting. So as we look at our timeline for fall of 2021, doors opening this summer, we will continue to build all the messaging for our fall communications launch. So in June, Mr. Wright came out with a video that was sort of the intro to a 6 video series that will begin in fall. We'll open up this fall with a video on our graduate profile. We'll then talk about what will learning look like at Westlake Charter High School, academic and social emotional learning, student culture, and then we'll finish up with that facilities piece. And I think Mr. Ike mentioned earlier that that facilities conversation, the timeline on that has been extended to September, end of September 15th. And so those updates will be coming as that information comes out. And we're excited. I think this video series, the intention of it is really to continue to bring our community along with us and giving them that information that they need and to about our high school and really targeting those families that are making that decision, but then our entire K-8 community and the broader community as well. We are also looking to build a hub for that information to live. So for those of you who were I think most of us were with us at the opening of this campus, and we had that really slick Westlake weekly or Ways to Westlake website. There's been some conversation around, hey, let's build a place for information to live so people can go back and look at the archived info. So that video series will launch in fall, and then also in fall, the lottery opens. I was at our 8th grade promotion pickup, and I had a 7th grade parent new 8th grade parent walking across the parking lot like, we're going to miss you, but I'll see you in fall. That's in fall of 2021. And so our families, we know that our 8th grade families are thinking about high school. And so that lottery opening will be a wonderful piece for our Natomas community. And then also in fall, in April, I mentioned that we were doing some work around staffing because that staffing piece is such a crucial part of our overall plan, and so and the high school being successful. And so we have in this spring done some recruitment efforts and some one-on-one conversations with some really amazing high school educators in our area and in Southern California as well. We will come into early fall, and continue that recruitment effort and looking to keep that ball moving so that we are, as you'll see in winter, we've got that staff on board. And can begin the ever important job of onboarding our staff in the winter. In winter, enrollment will begin, and it's I was talking to a high school principal who had recently opened a high school in a community where there was going to be several middle school feeders, and she said, I just wish that I had my 8th graders and could have, like in January, started talking to them and saying, you are going to be my 9th graders. I need you to come in and building those important culture pieces, getting them excited about it. And I was like, I have that. I have those 9th graders. They are sitting in classrooms and we're so excited to tap into them and get that momentum rolling. One of the things I think we talked about in spring was those ninth graders being part of the mascot development process. And so excited about that. I think we talked in spring about a coyote being our mascot. I'm still not sold on that idea, but
because there was a coyote on campus. Yeah, right. Got it. Yeah, scratch that. Sorry.
Yeah. So yes, by winter we will have the staff. I can't wait to introduce those staff members to you as we have that team that's going to again open those doors in the fall of 2021, and then as we round the corner into the spring of 2021, looking at that site development, making sure that we have those pieces in place, and then just really building out that site, and again bringing those families along with us, those families that are now enrolled and are part of that first class. So again, a busy year ahead of us. The work from quarter two continued on. I'm assuming that the next couple months I will come back and Leslie and I probably jointly will update on Q3 and some of the details more in the weeds of what's going on there. And I'm open to answer questions that you may have or thoughts. I also just want to thank Jed. I think in April we were talking about our honors pathway and some of the ideas we had around that. And when we were able to meet with Chris White from High Tech High in the spring and had a great conversation with him that has really helped us to develop our thoughts around that piece. And it was just such a testament to our board and the resources that you are providing us with to help us in the development of this high school. So thank you so much for that, Jed.
What did you end up with? Is it right to offer an honors option as opposed to AP, or is it better to just not do it at all?
So I think we have landed a place where offering that honors pathway is something that we're looking to do, and I will come back and present a little bit in more detail on that. When we originally heard honors pathway, we saw honors as just a different label for AP, and then in talking to Chris, saw the embedded nature of the honors, and it was like this. It was supposed to be a 45-minute conversation that poor Chris was stuck on the phone with Leslie and I for 2 hours as we were asking. So we've continued to stay in contact with him. But yes, that honors pathway is what we're looking to move forward with.
Good. I thought that might be of use to you, so that's great.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Jen, I'm glad you chimed in because honestly, board. If we hadn't gone through distance learning and school closure and all the trauma that we've been engaging in the last several months, Mrs. Batten and the team would have been bringing you along the way. And when you see what Emily and Leslie and the team have put together, you are absolutely going to be starstruck about the way we've been able to include an honors pathway that is non-tracking. At the same time, how do you not track students but also have honors? What she is going to present to you in the fall is going to blow your mind. We will be one of a kind, unlike any school in the region, and it will be pure Westlake joy. So great job, Mrs. Batten. Thank you. Any questions, team, for Mrs. Batten? Ms. Patel?
I just want to thank you and the team who's building the high school. John released that video. Gosh, John, I don't know, was that yesterday or 5 months ago about the high school, whenever that was. But I ran into an old student of mine who I looped with who was moderate to severe needs in an inclusion classroom and eventually went into homeschooling. And I know the family well. Long story short, she's wanted to get him integrated back into school. He ends up being like the freshman age eligible, so to apply next year. We've been talking for like a year and a half, and I forwarded that video to her, and she's like, oh my gosh, I thought you were telling me about a utopia that you were building, and like I see it's coming to life. And so I know that our families, like it's our family's dream to be there, but there are so many people in our community that this model is what they're looking for. It's small, it's SEL, it's include, it's everything, and so it's just exciting to see the pieces come together.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, I think we want to keep it small, but I think you're going to have a lot of people wanting what they're putting together. It's a pretty amazing package. Okay, any other questions, Ms. Gibbons?
Yeah, just two, what I think will be quick questions. One is there anything about the nature of what we're experiencing with the pandemic and potential further shutdowns and things like that that is being factored in, and that would impact kind of the launch of this our high school? And then two, can you, Emily, just speak to what the next kind of touch points are? Like, what are you planning to bring to the board next, I guess, in the next few months?
Em, want me to take the first one? You take the second one?
Hey, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's a great question. So how does the pandemic affect our high school trajectory? A couple of months back, we did look in the mirror and think, gosh, should we push pause on this high school? And we thought long and hard, and we fought the good fight and decided, hey, regardless of what happens with this pandemic, kids are going to need a high school to go to in the fall of 2021. And maybe more so than ever, they're going to need a high school that focuses on the balance between academic and social emotional. So we're committed. We are 100% all in on opening up our high school in the fall of 2021. Now, as we are planning for all of the amazingness that Emily's going to fill you in on, we are, of course, in the background going, how does that look if we're in distance learning? How does that look if we're 6 feet apart? How does that look? And so, yes, all of the same considerations that are being made at this site will be being made for that site as well. But we are all systems go unless somebody comes out and says there's no need for a high school in the fall of 2021. We just feel like what we're offering is really what our children deserve, and I think now more than ever, maybe they need it.
Great news. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Batten?
And then, Ms. Gibbons, to your question of what we're going to be bringing back. So as we talk about the work that was done in Q2 and update on the work for quarter 3, which is July through September, we will be focusing on those buckets that I spoke to on the regarding the video. So what will learning look like? We're going to talk in more detail about what learning will look like at Westlake Charter High School. We'll update on academic and social emotional learning. We'll be updating on culture, and then obviously that ever important facilities update as well. So really thinking about those 6 buckets as our areas of update over the next few quarters that will take us through the year. I think most specifically coming back in the next time we present will most likely be at that programmatic piece. I spoke to the honors piece and talking in more detail around that ever important question of what learning will look like, both academic and social emotional. And then we have a graduate profile that has been driving a lot of our work. So our graduate profile is that description of what a Westlake graduate will look like. Mr. Ike spoke to it in the video. I know we've talked about it at the board meeting in the past months, but we have a final version. So the very first thing that we'll unveil next is that graduate profile, because I think it really helps to highlight where all the work is leading us to. And when I say work leading us to, the graduate profile has really helped us to look at our K-12 program and how are we not building a 9-12 on top and just plopping it on top of a K-8, but really sorry for to use the word plopping, it's my summer talk. Really extending the mission of our K-8, and so that graduate profile being the first piece we share with you will be that would be what will come out first.
Yeah,
great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Batten. We look forward to your next update. I mean, I'm very much looking forward to it. This is very exciting. Mrs. Golick, I think that is the end of the executive director's report. And friends. Back to the agenda here.
John, since the consent agenda is next, have any comments come in?
Let me check real quick. I looked a moment ago, but let me check again real quick. Refresh. No new board comment. I'm sorry, no new public comments.
Perfect. So next we have our consent agenda. There are 3 items on it. If there aren't any questions on those items, I'd appreciate the motion.
I will move the consent agenda.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
Second.
Just pick one, Amy.
Okay. Done. Okay. Hope?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Asa?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
And Jed?
Thank you. That brings us to our first regular agenda item, which is receive, report, and ratify actions regarding school reopening plan. So back to you, John.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I recognize that we're already an hour into the meeting. We're just getting to a big topic here. If you at any point need to turn off your camera and rub your eyes or stretch, you won't offend me. But I do have an exciting set of slides here that I want to go through. They're all more or less based on the handbook that you reviewed today in the board packet. So let me dive into there and get these slides going for you. And I'll try to get through them. I will certainly take questions as we go, but I would hope that we would also have a discussion at the end just to make sure we're all on the same page. And hope if there's anybody watching and would like to make board comments during this portion of the show, I'd assume we would take them at the end of this.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, we'll take it one more time.
Okay, good. So let's talk about reopening school in the fall of 2020. I know that's the topic on everyone's mind right now. So let me kind of dive in. We've been communicating with our community. Our plan that has just recently passed is on June 11th, we had our last board meeting. That was on YouTube. We had a special edition of the Westlake Weekly that came out right after the board meeting. At that Westlake Weekly, we announced our parent town hall meeting. We released the high school video series, had about 160 views on that video. Our parent town hall meeting on June 15th led us to 90 live viewers, but we had 330 people view it after the fact. I only give you these numbers to give you a sense of how many people are plugged into what we're talking about along the way. My biggest fear is that we'll come out with a plan and everyone will say, where did that come from? But it seems like some people at least have been reading or watching and following along as we've been talking about this throughout the summer. During the parent town hall meeting, we had over 90 surveys received as part of that town hall. We used a lot of that survey data to drive a lot of the decision making that you'll see tonight, that you'll see in the reopening handbook. June 28th, we sent out a Westlake Weekly, and we launched that website that I told you about, and it includes the beginnings of the handbook and FAQs. And we had just over 70 views on the video on that page that discussed how the 5 phases or the 5 levels would operate that you guys are all very well aware of. So again, we've had some community engagement thus far. We'll continue to communicate throughout the summer. Now, the Westlake Weekly comes out on July 12th. That's this Sunday. We may actually just send it as an email just to reduce one click away. But the next communication's on July 12th. That's 1 month from opening. We are opening August 12th, 2020. And so this communication starts as a chain of communications that is kind of a 30-day countdown going forward. Uh-oh. The clicky click stopped clicking. Oh, there we go. Internet caught up. This weekend we'll be reintroducing the Return to School website. We'll be offering our families cohort and orientation information. We're going to do a mail merge that says, Dear Mrs. Smith, your child Bobby is in a cohort A, so that when you look at our plans, you can start planning, I'm in cohort A. I'm a Monday, Tuesday, or I'm a Thursday, Friday type of cohort if we use that section of our plan. We launched in the communication this weekend a 3-part survey. Number 1, which families would like to engage in long-term distance learning? Some families don't want to return because the COVID count is becoming so high in Sacramento and across the region that people are saying, hey, I might just keep my student home, and we absolutely respect that. I'll talk a little bit about our program for long-term distance learning and how those students stay associated with the classroom, and I'll talk about that in the presentation. The second part of the survey says, hey, technology is needed to prepare all students for distance learning. Whether we're in full-time distance learning, alternating days that will require distance learning, or even some type of distance learning on campus, students will need access, so we're needing to ask our families, do you have technology and Wi-Fi? And the last part of the survey is, hey, if we all agree that something has to happen with our schedule that's going to create some type of alternating days, and we have to acknowledge that that's going to create some hardship for childcare, and how can we demonstrate what's possible in school and community collaborate? We're working with our WAVE parent team to say, hey, could we orchestrate a parent-child care cooperative? Hey, you and I both have students in the same classroom. We're both on the same cohort. Hey, I'll watch them on one day, you watch them on the other day, because they're already part of a same cohort. So we're starting to launch that survey and give that data to WAVE and see if we can't orchestrate our families working together to support one another. You'll hear more about that tonight. We launched the Return to School Family Handbook, which you all had a chance to look over, and I'm going to go over it tonight. And these are the big updates, right? We organized all of the information through our 5 planning areas: health and safety, academic and social emotional instruction, tiered support, logistics and operations, and collaboration with our community. So we'll dive in and look at that right now. This is the Reopening Schools Handbook that's going to be delivered to all 1,000 plus student families this weekend. And I'll kind of go through some of the highlights. In the introduction, we make very clear that there's going to be a lot of questions still. I'm a huge fan of Amber Husted. I share communications with her often. And, she said very clearly, I love the communications. You realize this is just going to lead to 8,000 more questions. And I'm like, yeah, of course it is. And we will continue to update this document. We will continue to answer questions. It feels like the more answers we decide, the more questions it generates. And that's just the iterative work that we're going to have to engage in going forward. I want to note that in this document, we kind of acknowledge in the introduction that this has just never been done before. We've never asked families to alternate days. We've never asked teachers to teach in class and distance learning and long-time distance learning simultaneously. The burden on everyone right now is exorbitant, and we have to recognize that this has never been done. There's going to be bumps in the road, but that if we demonstrate what's possible in school and community collaborative, we really live our mission, we'll get through this together, and we have to keep the lines of communication open to do that. And therefore, this document will evolve. This PDF document is the July 12th version of this document because it will be published this Sunday. But immediately thereafter, on Monday morning, it'll start to change and evolve with new information as we go forward. And the last thing we put in the introduction is that the school cannot mitigate the spread of COVID-19 alone. We are spray painting dots on the ground. We are buying masks so everybody has one if they need one. We are keeping people 6 feet apart. We're developing protocols, procedures, and processes to make sure that students are safe. But I got to tell you, I'm already having teachers email me and say, I'm getting nervous about coming back to school. I drive by the park and I see our students not following the guidelines, and I'm worried for my own health. And so I need to say to our community, we love this community, but we can't do this alone. If we want to keep school open, we need to figure out a way to make sure we're all teaching our students that it's not a bad thing to do something that keeps somebody else safe. And so I hope it's okay to have said these things, but we said them right there in the introduction openly. The Return to School Family Handbook Health and Safety section, is a lot of the stuff that I think you must know about already, right? But the thing is that this section is first for a reason. I could have put the school schedule first because that's what everybody wants to know about. But we kept to health and safety as our first priority, and it's our number one bullet point because all decisions are based on this. And so our commitment is really clear throughout this document. It is a commitment to the health and safety, and that's the physical, mental, and social emotional health and safety of our students, staff, and our community. There's an Oxford comma missing there. And the reason I bring this up is because if you read the American Pediatric Association's recent guideline, they came out strong and said, we got to get kids back in school for their mental health and social emotional. And the American Pediatric Association is a credible association, but they represent kids. They didn't mention the teacher's health. And so I think it's really important that we as a board have an obligation to represent all of our people in the decisions that we make. And so that's in this document. You'll see throughout that it is about everyone's health, and that health includes physical, mental, and social emotional. The items that are covered in the July 12th publication when it comes out this weekend is there's health screening. How will we check for temperatures? How will we do health screening? How do we prioritize hygiene? Social distancing is covered at length. Face coverings is covered in detail. Student staff illness. I'm going to pause here and give a little detail. So I want people to recognize that if someone tests positive for COVID-19, and whether that's a person on campus or even a family member of a person on campus, it launches a coordination with the Sacramento County or the local health officials. And through that coordination with local health officials, they will help to make the call of whether or not the exposure warrants a closure of a classroom, a closure of a grade level, or a closure of the whole school. And so I just want to be clear that as we go forward, any known exposure or positivity test can lead to the domino effect that could lead to the entire school closing. And so while, of course, everybody is wanting to be safe for their own health and safety, we have to be cognizant that what we do together affects all of us. And so I foresee us at school working very hard to keep this the transmission rate down. We just kind of need the whole community to pitch in with us. We cover what happens when somebody displays symptoms at school. We have a long section here on shared spaces because it's very important. Why aren't we using the cafeteria? Why aren't we having assemblies? What are we doing about things like shared supplies and things like that? Very clear. We are trying to keep people in small cohorts and not have them intermix and touch or be around people outside the cohort. So very, very clear in that section there. When we get into academic and social emotional instruction, I'm going to talk about this, but then I'm going to jump into the scheduling piece. So the new pieces that were covered in this publication include the redesign of distance learning, and I'll talk about that. We talk about recess because really, as a social emotional factor, it's very important that we say we have to have recess. Like our children we'll get bored comments from the kids if we don't have recess. Now, recess has to be structured differently because we can't just have kids running around and using the jungle gym, so that's going to look different. We're committed to recess. We're committed to physical education, art, and Spanish. It may look different, but we're committed to it. It is part of our charter. It's part of who we are, and that's in the handbook as well. Discussion on field lessons is in there because we've obviously had to reduce field lessons until further notice. But the impact on school schedule is the big section here. So you'll recall we have 5 levels when we talk about the impact on the school schedule. Distance learning is a viable potential option for school. If we don't start off in distance learning, we may end up in distance learning at some point. So it's important that it's one of the factors that we consider when we consider a flexible model. Number 2, some form of orientation model that allows us to bring small groups of kids onto campus. They haven't been here in 5 months. They need to learn the new protocols. So how do we get kids on campus in small groups? And then, of course, we slide into the baseline, which is level 3, which is this alternating A-B schedule where cohorts of kids are coming on alternating days. And you'll see that tonight. And then there's this increased capacity. We made some excellent ground on this. Now, we want you to know, we want all students on campus every day. We are just not coming out and saying that that's something we could do on day 1 because we're going to commit to the health and the safety of all of our community, and we're going to work our way there iteratively. But we believe we have some real options to get to increased capacity that will get our students on campus more often. We'll tell you about that tonight. And of course, full capacity level 5 is back to business as usual, and we know that a vaccine is maybe 12 to 18 months away. So I'm gonna dive into these pieces for you, and during this section you can stop me or wait to the end. But I'm gonna go through the first 4 sections. Distance learning. Families can, as of this weekend, start selecting long-term distance learning. But what's important about this is that these children will all be assigned to a classroom. We aren't going to take children, assign them to distance learning with an independent studies teacher, and that's the only relationship they have at our school. They're going to be assigned to a classroom because when it's their birthday, when they get a new puppy, we want them collaborating with their peers. Now, if they can't collaborate in person in class, fine. We will develop daily opportunities for all of our students on distance learning to collaborate with peers and staff. And that's a big commitment to keeping our community together. We have to assume that all students will need to engage in distance learning at some point this year. We have to assume that because even on the A-B model, you're distance learning 3 days a week. So we have to prepare our students, our staff, and our community for this reality because not only is it part of the A-B model, but let's be honest, the COVID count is higher today than it was when we shut down on March 12th. So the reality that we may end up in distance learning again is staring us in the face, and we need to be prepared to be the best at it. We need to be prepared to make sure everybody has technology, everybody has Wi-Fi, but more importantly, that we have a really strong instructional practice that turns distance learning into a viable daily learning experience, not just something we passively engage in. So the redesign to distance learning includes these items. There will be daily live interaction with staff and peers. There will be options to learn at times when convenient as well. So as that equity piece that we discussed months ago, we can't have live daily instruction and be like, well, if you missed it, you missed it. That's not Westlake. if we do daily live anything, maybe it gets recorded and posted into the Google Classroom so the student who has to wait for the mom to get home at 8 p.m., they can do it then, and that's fine. So it has to have daily live interaction, but it also has to have the option for our kids to learn when it's convenient for them. We must use multiple mediums, digital medium, paper medium, manipulatives. What can we send home on a weekly basis to make sure our kids are engaged in learning? And then it has to have grade level instruction that combats academic learning loss and combats the social emotional isolation. We are talking about like actual academic progress, graded assignments, but more importantly, really investing in social emotional relationships and social emotional learning to make sure the health and wellness of our student is our primary focus. And so distance learning has changed. We will all engage in it at some level this year. Our teachers in the background are preparing amazing things. Not just a shout out, Heather Chastain sent a little nugget. Also, Sally Hubbard, Janie Leggett said some thoughts this week as well. And just to look at what they're thinking on their summertime off about how to serve our community in this wildly new field, I couldn't be more proud than I am to be part of Westlake Charter School. So distance learning looks different. We all have to be prepared for it, and it's part of our 5-step plan so that we could leave it behind and we might end up back in it. Maybe I should pause. Any initial thoughts on distance learning? Ms. Gibbons? I figured I'd break it up and hear you guys a little bit. It'll slow me down.
Yeah, quick question, and I think you probably covered this, but if a parent or a family says, we want distance learning, and then they realize that that doesn't work for their student, is there a spot reserved for them?
Thank you, because if I didn't make that clear, I'm going to say it 3 more times, because that is the most important part of our plan. Every student is assigned to a classroom. Bobby is in Mrs. Smith's classroom. Bobby's on long-term distance learning, decides to come back. Bobby's in Mrs. Smith's class. Bobby has been doing daily live interaction, not just with Mrs. Smith, but all the kids in Mrs. Smith's class. Bobby has just been on distance learning, but so have the other kids in that class. The other kids have been on an A-B schedule. So I'm not even sure that we all even know who's A-B and who's long-term distance learning. So yeah, there'll be a spot for that. Now we're coming up with some mechanisms to say, hey, give us some heads up before you just show up, because we might remove a desk or we might move things around. So we would like to work out a deal with our family that says, hey, we have a seat for you. Give us a little advance notice before you as you're coming back. But we want you back. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think we're doing it a little differently than other places, and I think it really reflects Westlake. Okay, no other questions on distance learning? So orientation, again, maybe this is a little Westlakey, but the idea is this. We want to reopen with a focus on mental, physical, and social emotional health, and to do that, we want to keep our kids in very small groups for a short amount of time and teach them in these small groups all the protocols they need to know for safety. But we need to do it in small groups to reduce anxiety, not just for the students, but for the staff. Hey, I saw a blog post from a nurse in New York who said, hey, teachers, since you're the new frontline workers, here's some frontline experience, because I was a nurse in New York, and I thought, the anxiety of our staff has to be acknowledged. That if we just said, hey, teachers, you're going to have 28 kids in your classroom Monday morning, make sure they all stay 6 feet apart and nobody gets, it just isn't fair to anybody. So this idea that for a short amount of time, we're going to utilize both the A-B schedule and the AM-PM shifts to make these small groups. Now, look, I'm going to acknowledge those are really short days. You're saying that I'm only going to go to school on Monday and Tuesday because I'm a cohort A, and I'm only going to go in the AM? That's a really short amount of time. And as a family member, I'm like, oh, that is painful. However, to know that my child will be in Mrs. Patel's class with just 7 other kids, getting the one-on-one orientation that my child needs, we feel like that is really the benefits really outweigh the cost for a short amount of time. And we're working with our teachers in the background to determine how long do you think orientation might take. But we like this option because our kids haven't been in school in 5 months. Bring them back in groups of 7 in the morning shift. Then they go home. Then the afternoon shift comes. And they're there. And then, a few days into it, a week or 2 into it, we're rolling on to the next schedule. Now, look, we know that orientation might take a little longer at certain grade levels. I mean, I keep thinking about kindergarten. These guys have never been to school before. It might be okay to take it slow with them to make sure they are ready to go. So we are working with our teachers on how long we think orientation will take. Any questions on the orientation model? If you look at the handbook, you'll kind of see the diagram, the way it works out here, that you have 28 students broken into 2 cohorts of 14, and then 4 small orientation groups of 7. And these 7 kids come in the morning, and these 7 kids come in the afternoon. That happens 2 days in a row, and then it flips to the other group on the second half of the week. Any questions on that, you guys? Okay.
John?
Yeah.
I might have missed it. How does orientation work for middle school?
Yeah, it's the same model in that they come in a small group and then they'll experience both their humanities and their math science, but it's just going to be a very small group. While there's going to be protocols to learn regarding health and safety, which is the primary focus of what we're trying to do in orientation, the reality is that we also need to learn the orienting protocols regarding like how does distance learning operate and things like that. And so every grade level really needs some deep diving of what is going to be expected of them. And we think doing that in small groups all the way up through 8th grade is probably appropriate. I think middle school will go a lot faster than kindergarten, but still giving them time to make sure everyone feels safe, to reconnect in a way that's healthy. I think it's a good opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't just like they were coming for advisory in that small cohort.
Yeah.
That you plan to wrap in their day to that orientation, and so it's a little bit different than a class that doesn't switch.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the only difference is the duration of time and the amount of kids on campus, but they will still get to see their math, science, and humanities. Yeah, good question. Okay, I'll roll on to our baseline level 3. Right, this is the alternating block model. You can see, cohort A comes on Monday and Tuesday, and then they come on. Cohort B comes on Thursday and Friday, and then on Wednesday, everyone is connected. This is kind of an interesting day because there can be some small group intervention, but there can also really be some whole group instruction potentially, where I'm really talking to my whole group of students. Which is an interesting piece on the Wednesdays there. To meet the social distancing guidelines, all the students cannot attend at the same time as we're currently configured. You can't put 28 kids in the classroom. We can't put 24 kids in the classroom all at one time. That's why the A-B attend 2 days per week model is something we've built out. But this is really something that our leadership team, our teacher leadership team is committed to, and that's this. Every day is a learning day because distance learning will move students forward through the standards. Distance learning isn't the distance learning we experienced in the fall, which I thought our teachers did a great job of responding to a global pandemic with zero notice to offer an engaging opportunity to keep our community connected. But that was what we were doing then. The goals then were to keep us connected. The goals now are to move us forward through grade level standards and address academic and social emotional learning loss and isolation. So every day is a learning day because distance learning is a legitimate, engaged learning opportunity, as is the in-class. They must be comparable. So we have to acknowledge that this puts a heavy childcare burden on our families, number one. As I say this A-B model, I think of everybody who's like, well, what am I supposed to do 3 days a week? And so that has to be acknowledged. It also puts a heavy burden on our teachers to teach in class and online every single day and move everybody through the standards simultaneously. Again, it hasn't been done before. The burden is heavy. And we also recognize that it reduces time on campus for our students to connect in person with their peers. So those are acknowledged. We just believe that the health and safety of our students and the community come first. And we think that by working with WAVE and our base team, we can assist with maybe that parent cooperative where we can assist with childcare. And then we're working with our teachers right now in the background through leadership to say, hey, how long could it take to potentially get from baseline to level 4? And in level 4, I'll show you some of the plans we have to maybe return to school 4 and 5 days a week for certain grade levels. This is a hard pill to swallow because I know there are schools out there that are saying, hey, we're all going to come back to school 5 days a week, and if you don't want to come back, just you do full-time independent studies. But we're not saying that at Westlake, and partly we're not saying it because I believe our teachers can really provide a high quality learning opportunity for all of our kids every single day, whether they're in class or engaged in distance learning, because our teachers can pivot in this way, I believe. I also believe that the reality is every decision we made through the lens of health and safety, and it's hard to look the other way and say, well, what's the difference between 6 feet and 3 feet? Well, we couldn't swallow that pill. We said, no, we're gonna err on the side of health and safety guidelines, follow those guidelines to a T. So this is where we've landed as our baseline. I'll tell you how we plan to expand from here going next. Are there any thoughts, questions, concerns, or pushback here on the baseline model? Cool. I know you've seen all this before, but there's subtle differences and new highlights. But okay. Okay, so we're talking about the increased capacity piece here. This is level 4, and I think it's very exciting. Again, it's really important that we think about this as a sliding scale, because if we get out to baseline and we have to close the school down, where are we? We're right back at level 1. And when we come off of level 1, we might come back at baseline, we might come back at orientation, right? So this is a sliding, flexible scale, but this is a very exciting portion of the scale. So to increase capacity, we have to continue to meet the social distancing guidelines. Well, how can we do that? Well, we could do that by having less kids in the classroom or bigger classrooms. So let's look at what that might look like. First thing out of the gate is we have increased the number of classes we're offering kindergarten through 3rd grade. We typically offer 5 kindergarten classes and 5 3rd grade, 5 first, second, and third. We offer 5 classes, 110 students divided by 5 equals 22, and we know 20 is kind of our max cap for social distancing. So we looked across our organization, recognized that some amazing teachers had full credentials, but were teaching as part of our specialty core, and they volunteered to step in and said, hey, put me in, coach. So we have an amazing teacher, Yolanda Soto, who is a former kindergarten teacher, who's a Spanish teacher now, former kindergarten teacher. She's going to teach kindergarten. In 1st grade, Joanna Hernandez, who's been an incredible asset to our organization for years, is going to teach 1st grade along with that incredible team. Jenna Morgan, who's an amazing art teacher, used to teach 2nd grade, and she's going to go back and teach 2nd grade. And Saber Connolly, fully credentialed and veteran teacher, is going to jump into that 3rd grade team. And we're going to go 6 wide, because 110 divided by 6 is 18. So we can have classes of 18, or if we increase class size to 24 and divide that by 6, we can get down to 20. Either way you cut it, we can get to increased capacity kindergarten through 3rd grade because we've now expanded to 6 wide K3. Now, are we still going to start off at orientation? 100%. Why? Because it's about health and safety. We go into baseline, and then we have the ability now, though, where we didn't before. By making this move, we have the ability to get kindergarten through 3rd grade back on campus either 4 or 5 days a week and not have to utilize the distance learning piece. And so if our families can help us keep everyone safe and keep everyone healthy and keep everybody moving forward and help each other with a parent co-op and help watch each other's kids and create some child care options to get us through orientation and baseline, we can arrive here at increased capacity and spend the rest of the year, hopefully, in a daily experience for our kids. So we're very proud of that. Now, 4th through 8th grade is a little different. If you add one more teacher to 4th and 5th grade, you have class size of 28. They don't come down to below 20. They come down to 22. And so we're talking about, well, what would happen if we did add teachers? Where would we get them? We're looking at those options. But one option we definitely have to look at is, well, at the very least, could we develop other spaces on campus that are supervised? The library could be for 2 5th grade class cohorts that's a supervised location. So while cohort A is in Sally Hubbard's classroom, Sally's cohort B could be in the library doing distance learning from the library. Well, that at least gets everybody back on campus theoretically every day. And so again, if we work together, we might be able to get to this place where we have a seat on campus for every single student and be able to inch our way forward into a place where we're working together. And so no promises on how fast. We certainly don't want to open here but we think we can get here. And as I acknowledged earlier, this could be a 4-day-a-week option. It could be a 5-day-a-week option. But again, like because things are unfolding quickly and decisions are being made, we're still trying to determine how many days a week that would look. Any questions, thoughts, or concerns? I mean, on increased capacity. Any initial thoughts? Sean?
Just purely logistical, where is the extra classroom coming from for each of the K through 3?
Yeah, that is a great question, Sean. I wish I could bring up a map for you. A lot of thought went into that. And basically, I won't bore anybody who doesn't know the campus well with the details, but we placed the kindergarten class right there next to kindergarten. We placed the first grade class right there next to first grade. Somebody graciously moved. Second grade, we think is going to stay in Jenna Morgan's room because Jenna Morgan's art room faces second grade. Third grade, again, right there next to the third grade bathroom. Because we think, I know it sounds crazy, but like for our littles, proximity to the right bathroom makes a lot of sense for us. So we didn't want to take a first grade group and have them in Giovanna Hernandez's current room because that's like right inside the 4th and 5th grade quad. I can't imagine a first grader going out and going, look at all these big fourth graders. So we moved them around accordingly. I think you'll like the decisions. It placed everybody right where it's not perfect, but it's really we like the way it landed. If we were to expand 4th and 5th grade though, we'd have to get creative. So we'll keep working on it, I promise. Any other questions on increased capacity? Okay. All right. So the 5th level, obviously, right? Everybody, the 5th level is back to full scale, and we're just not even. I don't even have a slide on that because the reality is that's 18 to 22 months away. With a vaccine, but these are our scaled looks, at how this thing works. I want to remind us then on this orientation through increased capacity scale that we want to inch our way forward, get to a place, make it safe so we don't accidentally slip back to closure, right? The safer we are getting into this, I feel like the longer we'll be able to persist in that increased capacity. Let's hope. So the rest of the manual kind of unfolds like this, tiered support. Just want to acknowledge that our individualized education plans, our IEP meetings, our 504s, SSTs, MTSS meetings, they have to all be held virtually or via video chat this year. That's acknowledged in the handbook. We have very heavy focus on social emotional support and mental health in the handbook. This portion of the handbook is going to grow in subsequent weeks, but these are just kind of some baseline thoughts there, like making sure that we're focusing on the right things in our tiered support. The logistics and operations, again, this will grow greatly in the coming weeks. But the things that we covered this week were things that we thought were of interest. Hey, what are we doing about reducing the number of visitors on campus? Basically the handbook says no non-essential visitors should be on campus. And that's per the guidelines. How are we going to handle drop-off and pickup? We speak about instructional time in this handbook. It doesn't have start and end times yet, but we're working on it because the state of California just this last week released the instructional minutes minimums so that we know how long we can have school and have it meet the instructional minutes so we can continue to operate. It is a shortened school day, everybody, just so you know. I don't want you to be surprised when this information comes out. I think not this weekend, but next weekend we should have all the times. But the reality is the instructional minutes have shortened. If you take a look at the day, it's a shorter day, but we'll need that time to make sure that we're connecting with the kids who are at home. We'll need that time to make sure that we're developing not just the in-class, but the distance learning lesson planning. Our teachers are basically double planning, so we'll need that time, and I think that's why the governor gave it to us. Wanted to acknowledge in the handbook that the school calendar doesn't change. So school schedule changes, and you think, gosh, I only have school 2 days a week out of 5. That's not true. We have 180 instructional days this year. You might be, for a period of time, having 2 days a week of on-campus instruction, but these 3 other days are legitimate instruction where attendance is going to be taken and live daily interaction is expected, and that this calendar, 180-day calendar, will be respected. There will still be October break and Thanksgiving break and winter break. All of these holidays and breaks are built in. And I think this may be the second last piece here. And this is we covered a couple things in our communications and collaboration with our community section. I gave a timeline of when we're going to release new information going forward from now until the opening of school. It ramps up at the end. Also, I want to be clear about how we will communicate with families if there is a COVID-19 positive exposure. It's very important. I think this is on people's minds. Like, so wait, what's going to happen? Will I know if somebody in my area has tested positive? So that's in the handbook as well. We communicated about a couple collaborative opportunities, one of them being this parent child care cooperative. I keep talking about it, but I can't tell you enough how important I think this piece is to get us through that first month of school when we're trying to ramp back up. If we're doing levels 1 or at least 2 and 3, orientation and AB, baseline, we're really going to need people to help one another out so people can get to work, and that's important. And then we have a summer parent survey that I told you about earlier, and that is those 3 big bullet points. Do you want distance learning? Do you need technology? And how could you help out with a parent collaborative? Last piece is that our handbook acknowledges the work that BASE is doing. We all know that BASE opens up their first summer camp next week. We're very excited about that and the work that they're doing. That team is really working hard. They obviously, in this publication, refer to the health and safety guidelines they're following, the BASE hours that will be offered in the fall, and then they acknowledge on this page what they're exploring. How might BASE assist during these levels 1, 2, and 3, distance learning, orientation, and baseline? Because some of the questions come up, well, my student is cohort A, they go to school on Monday, Tuesday. Can I send them to BASE all day on Thursday? Can I send them to all day on BASE on Friday? And we're still exploring that. And so those answers are to be determined, but at least it's acknowledged in the handbook so that our families know we're thinking about it. Okay, so this is the moment we need to talk about reopening schools. You need to give me some feedback on anything you'd like to see look differently or support of the plan. The agenda item tonight is for you to accept the plan, should you choose to do so. Your acceptance of the plan gives us the ability then to go forward and utilize the plan. And also, to your approval will also acknowledge anything that comes up during this discussion regarding, like, well, I think we need to have this associated with the plan. Well, that would be part of the approval process, I believe. So, Hope, do you want to run a whip around, or how do you want to handle this discussion?
First, John, do you mind checking to see if you have any public comments?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then this will be a reminder to people who are out there watching that they can send in an email to admin@westlakecharter.com if they have questions or comments on this subject.
Yeah, as of now, no comments. I'm just going to refresh the page. And I just put up on the screen for YouTube viewers that they can make a comment. I just put the email up there. Let me go refresh this page. But Hope, I don't see any comments.
Okay. Just wanted to give people a chance, and we'll check one more time before we leave this item. So I'll go with I'll do a whip around with the names on my screen, which means I'm going to start with you, Shannon, and then go to Sean.
I think I don't have any questions. I'm processing a lot of that, but I am happy to see, because I think this is a question that Michelle brought up today and that I had last month too, just about that the student, no matter what path they're choosing right now, they have a spot in a classroom and that they can fluctuate in and out as their family feels comfortable with all of that. So that's my first comment that I'm processing.
Copy. Yeah, thank you.
We'll have another chance, don't worry. Sean and then Josh.
I don't really have anything to add or ask. I think that it's great with the information that we have, and I know it'll change as the information changes every 5 seconds, but I'm good with it as it stands right now.
Thanks, Sean. Josh, and then Michelle.
I like the plan. I think we've got most everything covered in there, and particularly I like the fact that kids can still, if parents choose to keep their kids at home for distance learning, they're still a part of the classroom, which I think is huge. One question I had though, John, is what's the feeling of the teachers and the staff as far as coming back? Is there a risk that, because I know we're trying to bring in other teachers to pull this off, is there a risk that we could lose talent versus coming back? And be scrambling to find more teachers to fill?
It's a great question, Josh. I got to tell you, when we took a staff-wide survey at the end of the year, and I shared that with the board, we had a very strong, resounding, 90+% of our staff were like, I believe in the school. I think we've got this. But, back in the time of the survey, I think we were seeing single-digit COVID exposures, positivity rate in Sacramento. And I have to be totally honest. I mean, I'm receiving emails right now from amazing educators who are saying, "Hey, John, I'm hashtag Team Westlake. I love us, but I'm scared. I'm worried. I'm driving by the park. I'm seeing the kids, not wearing masks, and I'm going to be in that classroom with those kids. And am I going to be exposed to, hundreds of exposures just because I'm in the room with only 14 kids at a time? The reality is those 14 kids, if they're playing in the park with 14 more kids, then exponentially I'm being exposed on a daily basis to potentially hundreds of exposures. And so that's why I call upon the community to please support us. If we love our teachers, which I know we do, like we gotta think about the health of the staff, and they're worried, Josh. I know that they are working hard to make sure that whatever we decide to do is viable and feasible. And that's what I love about Westlake. Everybody's like, hey, if we're going to go to orientation mode, or if we're going to go to baseline mode, put me in, coach. I got a plan. However, our teachers are also saying, hey, I'm worried. And I think we all are. So I'm just going to acknowledge that out loud, that I have several staff members whom you all love, and as do I, who are fearful about what it looks like to come back. And so again, as I look at the model, whatever we decide is the appropriate first step, whether that's orientation, distance learning, whatever the first step is, it would lead to the next steps. And so I know there may be some pushback on orientation, like, oh my gosh, it's only 2 days a week, half days. But I'm like, hey, for the sake of our educators who are nervous for their own health, the health of their families, having those small groups is probably, I think, a very Westlake thing to do. Yeah, it's an unusual time, Josh. I don't pretend to speak for all of our staff, but I can tell you I've had several staff members who I just think are amazing educators and amazing human beings who have said, "Hey, I'm going to be honest. I'm nervous." So I think there's some nervousness. I think a lot of the public rhetoric, a lot of the national rhetoric, saying, "Hey, we need to do this because it makes sense for political reasons," even. That rhetoric has got some people spooked because now we don't think we're doing it for the best interest of students or staff. Maybe we're doing it for other reasons. So it's got me worried for sure. And I think it's our job as a collective to represent, again, our students, our staff, and our community. So we can't not think of the community. I know a lot of our community needs to get back to work. We also got to not forget about those teachers and our staff as well. So we're in a pickle here, everybody. I think it's a really tough place.
Well, and I guess my question also was, what's the plan if we have 3 or 4 teachers that aren't comfortable to come back when we start this? How do we backfill that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, so we do have a process right now where we've asked all of our staff members to please let us know in this particular manner if you believe that you're part of a group that is high risk, right? And so we have some people who have acknowledged, hey, I'm part of a high-risk group. And that high-risk group has changed recently. I believe that type 1 diabetes was just added to the high-risk group, and pregnancy was just added to the high-risk group. And both of those, can be a factor for our staff. And so it's our obligation as employers to meet with each of those employees and say, hey, what does it look like for you to come back to school? What type of accommodations could we make to make you feel safe? What legitimately can we do to keep you safe and to keep the organization functioning? And everything has to be on the table, whether that's distance learning or facilitating school in a different way for different groups. That's all on the table. Our problem is, you guys, it's 30 days from tomorrow. It's going quick, and with the budgetary situation that it is, Steve and I have already talked about, should we go out and try and pick up a bunch of subs to have them ready because the subs are going to get taken up? Should we try to hire staff? Well, there's financial ramifications to that. We can't go hiring 4 new teachers just to have them sitting in the bullpen. But boy, I sure would like to. So it's a tough time, Josh. We're definitely weighing it out day by day. To be totally frank with you, you're asking the perfect and correct questions. The work that we've been doing for the last 30 days has gotten us to where we are today, and we know that that conversation is part of the next 30 days. I mean, the laundry list of things that we have to work on is incredibly long, and I gotta be. We're not slackers. Like I got people working 12-hour days, and they're not even on the clock. People are working hard at this thing, and there's more things to do than there's just more. I've never seen anything like it. It's a really tough time. So we're working hard on that question. I think we'll do what we do, which is work with our staff and make sure that we're all working together on what's the best solution going forward. I know that's not a perfect answer, but I think that's what I got.
That works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where too, I think where we've built in the flexibility for John and the team to make the calls really important. Because everything's so fluid, we haven't been like, you will do X, Y, and Z, right? We're trusting people who know what's going on, who are on the ground to make some of those calls. And so I just wanted to chime that in, because I think that's really valuable here, that we have that kind of trust.
It's a good point, Hope, because if we are a month into school and things are going well, but then like there's a classroom closure, a grade level closure, and then a second grade level closure, and those grade levels slip to distance learning, we need to be flexible to be able to make that call on the ground, like, hey, we're closing this grade level, we're closing that grade level, announce to our families how we're responding, because the 5 levels are already built and everyone knows the 5 levels, that we'll be able to slip in and out of those levels. So having that flexibility, I think, is key. Doesn't make it easy, but at least we have it. So yeah, I'm glad we're not locked into a one-size-fits-all model.
No, I'll fully acknowledge it's tremendously difficult, and I don't, and I apologize in advance for the stress it's going to cause.
It's not on you.
But watching the fluidity of this, I don't see how there's any other way right now. Yeah. So that brings us to Michelle and then Ashley. You were done, right, Josh? Yeah. Okay, so Michelle and then Ashley.
Yeah, I just want to recognize like the work and the thoughtfulness that has gone into this to have the phasing approach. I think it'll be really important to make sure families understand, so they're not trying to rush the school through those approaches. And being as somebody who has had to be in the thick of this since March, I completely want to commend all the great work and acknowledge the fact that this sliding scale will be sliding quite often. I think that's something we should just acknowledge on the forefront. I have 2 quick questions. One is around face coverings, and I know that there is some consternation about or concern around, children and using face coverings, and in particular, children that may have asthma and so forth. So I'd love to hear about how we plan to guide families with face coverings. And then the second is, I want to acknowledge that, teachers should have options to be at home and stay safe. And, if they're sick, to stay home and take that intervention without any pressure. I also want to think about, and this could be a question for you to maybe check back with the district on and others, but with subs, they're going to be rotating through many different schools. And so that's a different level of exposure that I think needs to be thought through. And I'm just curious if there's any discussions about that from a broader level.
Yeah, so the backward mapping on the sub piece, I'll start with that, then I'll try and get back to that first piece regarding masks. But the sub conversation is really a crossroads conversation that we're having internally right now. Everything from, how do you utilize internal resources to cover, specialty teachers if they're available, teachers co-sharing, people on prep. I mean, there's all those, but even those create cross-contamination within cohorts. So even if Ashley Patel on her prep period went and covered Vasa Lokhtev's class because he's out, Ashley's not around Vasa's kids. So yeah, there is a real problem with that. And honestly, to be frank, the sub pool is already thin. And this year presents a real challenge. And so we will be, continuing to try to build that resource out in the next 30 days. Actually, right before the board meeting, Steve and I were kicking around a couple ideas that are not fully baked, so I won't put them on the table today, but they're in the oven. We're trying to cook up like how to respond to this. And really, Michelle, you might be a great person for us to ask, and that is like, if you had to guess, you know, how many subs are we going to need on a given day? Because I look at this exposure tracking and how quickly you could say, teacher A talked to teacher B, who went to a bunco party with teacher C, D, and E, and now I just lost a grade level. And rather than bring in subs, you might have to close those classrooms. However, there's also just like the dentist appointment. Like the teacher's got to go get their teeth cleaned at some point, right? And so you're like, we're going to need daily subs. We're going to need that. We have not crossed the bridge of whether or not you could ever close a classroom for a day. But if you didn't have a teacher, then what we would traditionally do is put an administrator in there or bring in some support in that way. But my goodness, it's going to be a very different challenge. So Michelle, I don't have a great answer, but it's definitely something we're scratching on. And then as far as face coverings, we try to be as clear as we can in the handbook as a kind of level 1 response that we are requiring face coverings. We describe what a face covering is. We describe that if people could bring a face covering, that's what we would prefer. We describe that we will offer face coverings for those who don't bring them. Our face coverings that we've purchased obviously are usable during the day, and then they get dropped into a bucket, and then we'll wash them at night so that we will constantly have a supply of face coverings. We'll also have some disposable face coverings on campus as well. However, regarding the exemptions, we do acknowledge that the exemptions exist, and so we kind of loosely put that in the handbook and know that we have 30 days to talk to our counterparts in the region and be like, how exactly are you going to handle this? How are we going to handle this? Because we want to do it responsibly. We're not going to try and force anybody against their will to do something that we think is actually good for everybody. But it's tricky, right? Because I don't also want to leave the door open and say, well, if you don't want to, then you don't have to, because then we won't ever get out of distance learning. So it's not a great answer, Michelle, but it is like, we're loose right now, but we're broadcasting the message clearly. Face masks or face coverings, shields, all of those are what we would like to see happen. And we recognize exemptions exist, and we'll fine tune our way toward that in the next 30 days as we develop like the student handbooks and things like that.
Thanks, John. I would just say we're looking at things like, in the legislature, the assembly just shut down for a couple more weeks because of exposures that are happening. And so I think it's just important to keep on the front of folks' minds that this stuff is moving and it's changing. It's very dynamic and fluid, and it's not easy to predict either. And so I think that sub piece is going to be vital. And I don't envy you in your position and having to sell that. And then the only other thing I would just mention with face coverings is there's so many adults that actually are not wearing face coverings properly. So videos about how to properly wear face coverings being included in the messaging would be great.
It's a great note. We intend to do all of the above, but as well as, again, teaching everybody how to wash hands, not to touch your face. I've touched my face 50 times during this call, and I'm like, every time I don't do that. Thank you. And as to not envying me, Michelle, I said to somebody earlier, I think it was A-Dub, look, it is awesome to be the executive director of Westlake Charter School, like all the time. So don't feel sorry for me now, because when things are good, it's really good to be me. This is definitely a challenging season, but luckily I have you, so thank you. Hope?
Ashley and then Nancy.
Hi, I love the handbook. I think I just love to see the work that the leadership did in pretty form. It's going great. I have a few questions. I too saw, this one's kind of disrelated, but I too saw that ER doctor's post and read it and saw her recommend. She had kind of a list of recommendations, like teachers, here's what you do as a frontline worker, and it made me think. So I wonder about. She was really specific about surgical mask for teachers, and I just wonder about are we thinking about the mask types that our educators are wearing? I did, in the handbook, I noticed that there can't be a valve, and as soon as I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, my boys need new masks because theirs have valves on them, and that's not cool. Apparently, I didn't even know that was a thing. But I did notice that, so I just wonder about some of her recommendations and some really thoughtful things she talked about, like covering the eyes and some other things. So just that for teachers, and I'll let you talk to that, and then I'll tell you my other questions.
Yeah, Ashley, I mean, and as you know, with everything at Westlake, jump on the leadership team and help drive that ship. If you've got better information than the next person, then bring it. And let's talk N95 masks if that's what we need to do. Right now, we are acquiring shields, cloth coverings, and a shield drape, but we're like, hey, let's get everything that we can get our hands on, and then we'll decide how much of it you need. But we always give our teachers a little care package at the beginning of the year, and we're like, this is like the worst care package ever. It's a face shield, a face mask, like hand sanitizer. So, Ashley, I'd love to talk N95 and surgical masks if that is what's warranted. We looked at the masks with the surgical mask with the plastic insert as well. They're on back order. So everything's on the table for that. Please, everyone send that information in as you see fit. If you think you've got some good intel on what's appropriate for teachers, my goodness, please share it with me. And let's make that. Those are easy decisions to make, you guys. Like if we say this is the best product known to man and it's for our teachers, that's kind of a no-brainer.
Well, John, interesting that she said surgical versus N95 with my son, and when we were doing his dressing changes, we had to do surgical, and I was like, oh, that's just way more feasible for teachers. N95, literally, you've got sort of a ring around your face, and they're really uncomfortable. But the surgical, they tie here, your ears aren't getting pierced and pulled. They are more comfortable. So I just thought that was an interesting recommendation from her, that it wasn't at 95. It's probably more doable and comfortable. Just wondering about, but it kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of just, there are so many variabilities in mask types.
Yeah. Hey, Ashley, too, if I can just chime in, the hard part here is that no one on staff is a medical expert, right? Like, we have a lot of insight, and we all read different things. So I don't think, like, staff would limit a teacher from, like, doing their own thing, too. Like, so I'm just saying there'll be some limits between what the staff can provide. But I would also think that school could provide staff. Staff would be free to take additional steps that they thought were necessary. Does that make sense? I think there's going to be a balance and teamwork in play here, where between timing and ordering and supply chains, it's just going to take a real balance in what we do. So does that make sense? I worry from the legal perspective of having the school give any opinion about what really is or is not the most protective or necessary step. Michelle did a comment about how there's no evidence about surgical masks being better than other face coverings. And so just being mindful that we all have this different information. Sorry, I just wanted to chime in with that. It's going to be very, very hard.
My other question, three others, two are related. This one is not related. Wondering about, you talked a lot about, there was information in the handbook about exposure. And I just started thinking about an experience I had with someone who was embarrassed to share that she had been exposed because of judgment. And she was waiting. And then I look at, you could get tests in 2 days, but now they're backed up. It's up to 8 days. You got your test before you actually know. And so it started making me wonder about how we are going to know if little Sue's mom was exposed and tested, because she got her test, but her test isn't coming back for 8 days. And so Sue's still coming to school until maybe she gets that positive test, and wondering about maybe there is I don't know, maybe I haven't thought about that. Is there a survey that parents can anonymously say, Patel's class group A or whatever?
Hey, Ashley, could I chime in? In the handbook, you'll note that there's a verbal screening at the front gate every day as you come in through, and it includes whether or not anyone in the home has been exposed to or is experiencing symptoms, and also in the staff portion of the staff return to school, there is a clear notification that staff are required to kind of notify regarding exposure. And so, very excellent question and thought, but both are covered, I think, in the current policy. So give it a little read through, especially on Ashley, from you on the memo side. Go read the memo on that, and I think you'll see that we at least we should have a handle on that.
And I guess my thinking was kind of around our bully protocol, where
Ashley, can I chime in real fast, Ashley?
Yeah,
the problem with the bully protocol is that you can't have people report this anonymously, because there is a lot of I'm a COVID monitor for another organization, and the amount of gossip that is going around that actually is profiling kiddos and families because of their ethnicity and their potential exposure means that unfortunately in this case, you're really just going to have to rely on the individual family coming forward with that information and have trust and faith in our community that they'll be open and honest about it. I just have to really reiterate, the gossip I'm hearing is awful. Like, it is not fair to the families. And so it's just a whole nother way that unfortunately this is happening. Sorry to cut you off. I feel very strongly on this particular subject.
It's good.
Absolutely. I guess my wondering was if that was a secondary for those people that are holding that fear. Is there another place that they can do it versus being? I don't know. It was just a thought. I think we think about that for our kids. They're scared to say it out loud. You ask them, are they okay in class? And they say yes, but they have this digital form that they can be like, but actually, no, I'm not okay, Hope, and here's why. And it just made me wonder if that's true. And I had a personal experience with that. So just sharing that.
Good.
Right. And if they do a form saying they need help, Ashley, and they say that someone's exposed, I wouldn't expect staff to ignore it, right? Like, obviously, if a student comes forward, I know our community will wrap that student up and deal with those situations. I'm just saying, like, an anonymous form or like the bully form, right, just might not work in this situation. And so that's where going back to the hybrid schedule and building those relationships are going to be so important, that their kids trust their teacher and are willing to share. That's why I'm so glad it's a piece of it. So I 100% acknowledge your feelings and you wanting to give families as many opportunities as possible to report so that they don't feel scared about it. There has to be some balance there is all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I guess my last question was just around, and I know, John, a couple times you said you're still adding, so there's still some things that are going to be going. And you talked about teacher anxiety, parent anxiety, the protocol around returning to school. So I know that if I have this temperature above this, I'm gonna go home. All of those numbers are in there. If I say yes to one of these questions, I don't come to school. I show a symptom, I get sent home. But what's how do I get to come back? Our old policy was symptom free for 24 hours. That was something different, not COVID-19. Wondering about that re-entering school piece.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. As you acknowledge, definitely one of the 1,000 questions that will be added to the continuing versions. Yeah. If I answer every question we all have tonight, it will not just be a 4-hour meeting. We'll be here till midnight. So yes, that's a great question. Well crafted, but yep, it'll be answered.
Yeah, we're still working on that one at work for myself, actually, because of the whole battling between symptomatic and asymptomatic tests. And there's so many layers to that question that John and I have talked about it. It's just going to take time to develop it.
And I guess what I need from the board tonight is I need feedback and guidance on the 40,000-foot decisions, everybody. I need you to – we are standing before our community right now with a singular voice saying – this is our big plan. If we get caught up in the granular minutia, which I know we all want to, that's not where we need to be, because I promised all those questions, if you just email them to me, they'll become a part of the FAQ. So as we make comments tonight, like big boulders first in the jar.
I mean, that's a really good point. This is still a draft. And it's as draft as it is, because everything's so fluid. So you'd love to say it was final. But in some ways it may never be final because it's going to have to constantly evolve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that all your questions, Ashley, for now? Okay, so Nancy, then Vasa.
All right. So I really don't have many other comments. I think that it's been reiterated over and over again that everything will continue to be fluid. Just my one last question, and I realize it's pretty far away because it's phase 5 question, 12 to 18 months for a vaccine. I don't know that we know the answer to this, but I already know that there is hesitancy to any kind of vaccine. So do we have any indication of what that might look like from the state on whether or not it will be required for a child to return to school with COVID?
It's a fabulous question.
Coronavirus vaccine.
Yeah, fabulous question.
So I know that's not a question that we can probably answer, but it's the first that I saw and the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, it's a great question. I haven't seen anything on it, but yeah, it's a great question.
So Nancy, does that wrap everything up for you? Okay, Vasa.
Hey everybody! I love the plan, the slow rollout, just very intentional about protecting our staff and our students, and especially our community. I just wanted to comment on. I really appreciate the commitment to 5 days of instruction. That we're not saying that we're doing 2 days and then we're doing something lightweight. That we're really committing to giving the students 180 days. Of instruction, and also that we're still looking into our base program as a viable option and co-op options to help support parents with childcare. I think is really cool that we're doing that. I know that's a really complex piece, but the fact that we're still working towards that is really, I think, important for our community. And then Josh really hit on a lot of the things I was thinking about our staff, our classified and our certificated staff safety in terms of the health conditions and even pregnancy, which I think could be a complication. And it sounds like that's recently been added into the health guidelines. And if you know Westlake, we always have a baby or two a year. So I think all those things are important to consider as we move forward. So I just want to comment on those things. The hard work is really evident, and I think we're just moving forward in a real solid but careful direction. And I'm proud of us. I think we don't want to be in a place where somebody on our campus gets sick because of us moving too quickly. So I think we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. The complications of the childcare piece is a big boulder, and I'm very excited about collaborating with Wave on that and based on that. And anybody who has thoughts on that on the side and can help with thinking through that, I would love collaboration on that. How do we really empower people to help one another so that this orientation model and AB model isn't a massive burden? Because that's what we're seeing around this country is families saying we can't do what is the most safe option because of the childcare scenario. So we maybe have to demonstrate what's possible. So yeah, I think that's a big one.
Thanks, Vasa. Jen.
Thanks. I don't really have any questions.
Okay. I think that leaves me. So I don't really have any questions on the plan. I have the opportunity to read and edit, so I feel a little ahead of that game. But I guess John, you and I already talked about this. My big thing I'd just like to share is the reminder that kids are already traumatized and afraid enough, and so the more that as community members we can approach this plan with positivity and share it that way with students, I think that in the long run, the more I don't want to say normalized because this is not a normal time, but the more that we can become comfortable with this plan, the more we can help with hand washing and face mask wearing at home and learning what 6 feet, all those different pieces. The more we can act that out and be positive about this return to campus, no matter how much the AB schedule upsets work and the family life and everything else, because it's going to be rough for parents to try to balance. I think it'll be better for the kids in the long run. So, and I don't want that to stress out anyone either. I just feel like it's a time to sort of reframe and maybe approach it with some positivity. At least we're going back.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like the acknowledgement that find the positive, show some gratitude that it's one step closer to where we all want. Okay. Well, I hope this is an action item, so I think we have to receive this. I think there are still some questions in the next 30 days around what does happen on day one. We will start school on August 12th. However, we, per our own guidelines, haven't 100% announced what day one actually is. Are we in orientation? Are we in distance learning? I can't imagine us being all the way out to baseline, so we won't be. But day one happens to be a Wednesday. So in orientation, day one technically could be distance learning. It's just what is day two? And so as we all look around at the landscape and watch what happens with the virus, we're going to have to be making that decision going forward. I know that Brentwood down in Southern California and some other school districts have gone and said, hey, we're going to open distance learning and wait till this thing settles down. Our current plan is as stands. However, I think the flexibility has to be such that we are able to make real-time decisions going forward. And so I just want to acknowledge that. Before you vote to accept this plan, that it could look like distance learning, orientation, and back and forth, like Michelle said, variably sliding quite a bit in the beginning. So I guess that's all I have to offer. And I know that creates a lot of stress for our families. I'm worried about the families who I haven't heard from yet, who haven't watched the videos and haven't had a chance to read the items. Those families somewhere are going to find out from someone what the schedule is, and they're going to be devastated to realize that they don't have childcare a couple of days a week. And so I worry about them. And that we should acknowledge them as we go through this process.
And that, John, is really why this item is agendized for ratification, right? Because I wanted the board to actively say that this is a fluid situation and that the power to decide what happens on August 12th, could be August 11th, and that's okay. So the board needs to know our next meeting is technically on the second day of school. School is that close. And so that is why that's why we need this flexibility. And so what I need to hear as your president is if you are not comfortable with John making that call or would like a report back or would like a special meeting, if things change and we think there is a change that needs to be reported to you, that is, if that's what you want, if you would please tell me now. Otherwise, I'll just plan on having an August 13th meeting, unless, of course, the health and safety and we reach that, emergency board item type action. Of course, we'll have a meeting then, right? Like, I'm not saying I won't have a meeting. I just need to really gauge what the board's comfort is right now moving forward.
I absolutely support John in making those decisions. John and his team have been spot on through this whole thing, even before there was talk of closure in March, and I back him 100%.
Remember that? Even before closure, we already accidentally stumbled ahead. That's true. All right.
I agree.
All right. So then if there's a board member that's comfortable, I would ask for a motion that receives this school reopening plan and then ratifies. Oh, John,
I'm sorry. There is one public comment. Would you like me to do that before you vote?
Yes.
All right. Thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt. Here we go. Come on, click. Here we go. From S. Kanemo. The email reads, it is super important to stress that the valves in masks is pretty much useless to prevent COVID spread, and that teachers and parents know those masks should not be in class. Which is great. I don't know if she emailed it before we talked about Ashley or after. I don't know what time, but that's funny. That's a good comment.
Yeah, and I've seen more and more of those masks like at the grocery store. So it's going to be interesting as
Right.
there's just so much. There's just so much.
We did acknowledge in the handbook that those masks are not appropriate. So I think that's a good response to that question.
Totally. It's just, I just wanted to acknowledge how much there is. So with that, no other public comment at this point. Looking as if board discussion is sort of wrapped up on it, is there a motion to receive this report and ratify the actions within it?
I'll move.
Thanks, Josh. Is there a second? And second by Sean. Thanks. Miss Amy, will you please take a vote?
Yes. Sorry. Hope.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Josh.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Vasa.
Yes.
Ashley.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
And Jed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. That brings us to regular agenda item B, accept and approve declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
Yeah, there's no presentation with this, just the board brief that accompanied the actual document.
So if there are new questions on this item, I would ask for a motion.
I'll move.
I'll second that one.
Okay. So is that Ashley with the motion and Vasa with the second?
Correct.
Does that work?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's okay. Hope.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Nancy. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, there you are. Josh.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Michelle.
Yes.
Vasa.
Yes.
Ashley.
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
And Jed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. That brings us to our most exciting part of the night, Brown Act training. Yay! This year you're treated to me doing it, COVID and all. So I will try not to bore you to sleep, knowing that it's 8:50 at night, and this is great bedtime reading. But before I kick off, I just want to note that I referenced throughout a document called Open and Public 5. I have placed that into the folder for your review later, and that these slides are hyperlinked to that document as well. So at any point, if you want to, read it, feel free. So tonight we'll be covering history and intent, legislative bodies, meetings, notice agenda, and public participation requirements, and closed sessions. And these are just the overarching topics. All of you have heard this before, but hopefully we'll still have some, new and interesting pieces. So the Brown Act was resulted from a San Francisco Chronicle article that exposed secret meetings being conducted by local governments in 1952, and was authored by Ralph M. Brown, who was a Central Valley Assemblyman, and was really meant to safeguard the public's right to access and to participate in local government meetings. So it states, all meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body except as otherwise provided in this chapter. So, essentially, all legislative bodies covered by the Brown Act should then conduct their affairs as if within the House of Glass, meaning entirely transparent. And if you wanted to read the actual statutes itself, it can be found in the California Government Code, beginning at section 54950, and it continues through 54963. At the end of this presentation, there's also a link to that code in its entirety. So the intent of the Brown Act is to generally provide the legal minimums for transparency in decision making. and to ensure that deliberations and actions of the legislative body are open and public, to ensure meaningful public access to local government decisions. Meetings must be open to the public, held on a regular schedule, and follow a noticed agenda. There can be no secret votes. And it's not just the law, but it's also good business practice. And at the end of all of these slides, you'll see a link here, like I mentioned, to open in public, and then hopefully the pages. I tried to site check, but yeah. Who must comply? So the Act applies to meetings of legislative bodies of local agencies. So in our case, governing bodies are board of directors. They also apply to subsidiary bodies, which is any board, commission, committee, or other body of a local agency created by charter, ordinance, resolution, or formal action of a legislative body itself a legislative body. So that includes our 4 board committees. Now, there is one exception, and that is the Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. Now, this is a temporary advisory committee composed solely of less than a quorum of the legislative body that serves a limited or single purpose, that is not perpetual, and that will be dissolved once a specific task is completed. This is actually where boards can really go sideways because they'll throw a non-board member on them, right, which removes that ad hoc capability, or a project or problem will take longer than they thought it would, and so it ends up being a committee that lasts for years, where it really should only have lasted for 6 months. Like, there has to be a point in the decision-making process where you decide this just needs to be a standing committee for the purposes of transparency. We typically don't use these here because we are very mindful of the fact with our 4 committees of trying to hit those topics that might need the deeper work. And for the most part, we've been able to, have finance look at compensation. Like, we've done a good job of fitting it. So for board committees, then, the notice and agenda requirements are the same as the boards. Our quorum must have less than 4 board members, so 3 board members are the maximum of any board committee. Other board members can attend a committee meeting, but they must be passive and neutral observers. It is very unusual and often not recommended for other board members to attend committee meetings because you must be neutral in expression and body language. You can do no visual cueing, so there can be no wincing, frowning, smiling, giving thumbs ups or downs, and you cannot ask questions or make comments because all those actions can be seen as causing an outcome. So actually, in some ways, being online is helpful, right? Because you can watch the YouTube video, and no one on that committee would know, and so you could participate and learn that way without having that risk. So there's something positive for COVID time. So when does the Brown Act apply? So meetings are a congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body. So like I've mentioned, the board and its committees. It's when we come together at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate WCS business. It can also be, though, direct communication, personal intermediaries, or technological devices employed by a majority of the board members to develop a collective concurrence as to the action to be taken. So there's a note here about how teleconference meetings can legally occur if requirements are met. Most of you will remember that, again, in pre-COVID times, we could meet via teleconference, but we had to post the agenda outside where we'd be calling in from. So oftentimes, right, you would be on vacation somewhere and no one really wanted to open up their hotel room for the public to come in and attend, right? Like, oh, I'm holding my meeting on a beach in Hawaii. Like, it doesn't work. Though Angelique Ashby did one time, I think, do it from vacation. It was quite funny. But thanks to the governor, on March 17th, he issued Executive Order N2920, which I referenced at the beginning of this meeting, which does allow for legislative bodies to hold public meetings via teleconference and to make public meetings accessible telephonically or otherwise electronically to all members of the public due to COVID-19, and that is for the duration of the event. So as long as Governor Newsom does have his orders in place, this meeting will likely continue to occur in this fashion. Meetings do require a quorum to get started, and the quorum must remain for that board to continue doing business. This is largely because of the fact you don't know what information will be presented that will help arrive at that collective concurrence. Just quickly, so collective concurrence is a term of art, and what it really gets at are substantive conversations that are advancing or clarifying of understanding, that are facilitating agreements or compromise, that are advancing a motion or resolution. It could be debating, it's briefing or informational sessions, and it applies to all issues, projects, and action items. So just, you really don't, it's really easy to just be texting in a group or have one email go out to kind of get to that collective concurrence. Now, before you worry about when it does, like that you've had a violation, it does not apply to individual contacts and conversations, to conferences that are open to the public, and I use CCSA as that example because we can have a majority of the board, 10 no's, open and publicized community meetings, so if a bunch of us were in the same Rotary or had something else we were doing, legislative bodies, so obviously we can all go to the NUSD meetings, social and ceremonial events, so it's fine if we go to promotion together or someone's wedding or a retirement party. But the kicker is always going to be you can't discuss WCS business, even tangentially, because you don't know what other board members are around you or may hear, what you're talking about. Which brings us to our favorite topic, the serial meeting. Serial meetings are a series of meetings conducted through direct communications, intermediaries, or technological devices to develop a concurrence of opinion. So the first type we'll talk about tonight is the hub and spoke. So John briefs board members prior to the meeting, and in doing that tells us how each other is voting, so that we know whether or not we have a majority supporting an idea or who our opposition might be, right? Obviously, not a great idea. The next one is the daisy chain, which is actually the one I tend to run into from time to time, is when member A contacts member B, and then member B contacts member C, and in doing so lets member C know what member A is thinking as well as member B. And that just goes down and down and down until finally, member E knows what A, B, C, and D are all thinking before getting to the meeting, and the boards essentially reach concurrence without doing it in the public. Simultaneous has also become a lot more common because of text streams and instant messaging, and as well as social media, but I'll get into that in just a second. And then, as always, and you've heard this one a billion times, email was the best and worst invention for boards. So remembering that all deliberations should occur in public, don't respond to emails from other board members. Feel free to forward them to John. As ED, he can talk to anyone or sort through those issues, but really we should not be emailing each other. We are purposely, thank you Amy, BCC'd on board communication so that we can avoid the reply all button. Another bad thing for many reasons. So just be really careful because you don't know who else has been copied, so you don't know who's in that BCC. And then you also don't know who's eventually going to be reading the email. So all it takes is someone else getting their hands on it and distributing it to the rest of the board for there to be a problem. Like I mentioned, one-way transmission of background materials is okay for us to individually review it, as well as bringing together less than a quorum to review something if necessary. For instance, when Sean and I worked on the charter document together for editing, That was fine. That was less than a quorum. And so it's just keeping these sort of just in the back of your head as we go through our business. Collective concurrence is not required for one of these violations, so you have to be careful. So it's not as simple as we didn't reach a conclusion, so it must be fine. Just the discussion of school business could be enough to be considered a violation. What's next? Oh, yes, my favorite part, more technology, more problems. So the internet and social media provide abundant opportunities to post unfiltered opinions, thoughts, and general comments about WCS issues. When these entries or articles are especially timely or controversial, they practically invite comments by interested parties. While no court has specifically ruled on the internet or social media posts in regards to the Brown Act that's not a question. They haven't ruled on it yet. But the same rules that apply for serial meetings and emails likely apply to social media. So be very careful when you're conducting texting, tweeting, liking, swiping, and commenting on stories and third-party blogs and posts. A single click is speech, and on a post about a topic within WCS subject matter jurisdiction can be found to form part of the deliberative process. And it's going to be very hard, I think, particularly now, right, as we go into reopening and we do these different things, it will be easy to click and like someone, especially something posted by a friend who were friends with somebody else, and then by the time you know it, everybody has seen it. And so just really be careful. The other thing about social is that it also becomes very well documented, very broadly broadcasted, and very easy to flag for violation. So it's the speed at which a comment or post on a blog, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, or other online forum or platform can travel, the number of people the content can reach, and the interactivity among users creates potential danger when considering the application of the Brown Act. While new technology offers great communication potential with little effort, board members may inadvertently find themselves in the midst of an email conversation or conversation thread with other members without any such intent or thought or effort. And while it may seem behind the times or even counter to the concept of enhanced public transparency, such communications nonetheless present significant risks of Brown Act violations. So, bottom line, be wary of commenting on other board members' social media content to avoid unintentionally creating a serial meeting. And remember, not all social media discussions are public, and not everyone will have access or be heard. And it's funny. So we talk about this at work a lot. Like you think everyone's on Facebook or everyone's on Twitter or everyone's on Instagram, and doing this, you're leaving off whole segments of the population. So it's this balance of wanting to push everything out to be more transparent, but realizing you're still not reaching everyone. It's John, your comment about how it's those families who haven't seen any of this discussion yet, right? That you're worried about now, because how do you reach them and how do you get at that? So the oops was that a meeting portion. Collective briefings. So a quorum cannot meet together with staff in advance of the meeting for a collective briefing. But again, smaller briefings are okay. So meeting with 2 people is fine. It would be for John to be prudent not to share what is discussed as part of those meetings in terms of what people are feeling or thinking about their action. Retreats or workshops are fine, but the Brown Act does apply, and including discussions about long-term agency planning or even team building. Informal gatherings are okay. It's actually the pre- and post-meeting gatherings that are part of this that can be the scariest. This whole process has sort of taken away that risk. But it's those conversations of more than a quorum that continue to stay in the boardroom after that can be problematic. And like I mentioned, social media, and just ask yourself, if the board all likes or shares a position on a potential action, does that show collective concurrence? And then what if we get into a debate with our fellow board members on social media? So there are 3 types of meetings. There are regular meetings like the meeting we're having right now, which requires that an agenda be posted at a publicly accessible location 72 hours prior to the meeting. It's interesting. So agencies that have websites are now required to also post that agenda online, but it does not waive the needing to post an actual paper agenda where people can see it. It also has an interesting thing with kiosks. More and more public agencies are switching to kiosks outside their meeting, not only for posting the agenda, but also for logging public comment and whatnot. So we'll see what the legislature does with this moving forward. Now, special meetings can be called by the board president or a majority of board members. In those instances, only 24 hours of notice is required. You must post a notice or agenda and notify all board members in writing. This can be an email, as well as provide notice to requesting newspapers. And I don't believe we have any newspapers who are on a notice list, so I think we're good. The last type of meeting is in the emergency meeting. That is only for health and safety emergencies. I mean, if I was doing this a year ago, I would say that this would never happen, and now I find myself hesitating. Just because with everything that's going on, it usually requires a mortal threat. So it's a fairly high standard to get to that type of meeting. It has the same noticing requirements in that we must post, notify board members, and provide notice to newspapers, but we only have to do that 1 hour in advance of that meeting. Again, that's because it's meant to get at that truly emergent health and safety situation. It's also important to remember that all meetings must take place within the boundaries of our board's jurisdiction. So we interpret that to be NUSD, and that all our meeting locations must be ADA accessible. Mm-hmm. So notice is required for all meetings. Agendas actually are only required for regular meetings, but in practice, most everyone uses the agenda as their notice, so they're often used interchangeably. All meetings must be open and public, with all persons being permitted to attend. And arguably, what is the weirdest portion of this is that we must allow photos, audio and/or videotaping of our meetings. I've only had it happen once. Sean, were you on the board then? You don't think so? Howard,
I don't think so. I think it was right before I got on the board.
I mean, I know
that school, right?
No, it wasn't. It was yeah. It's odd. And Amy texted Lisa Cora, our legal counsel, and said, "Hey, can we have to allow this?" We do. So the only time we don't have to allow it is if it's really disruptive. So I want you to picture like the audience member who wants to get up and put their phone like right in your face, right? That you don't have to allow. As long as it's respectfully done, following decorum rules, it can move forward. We cannot put any conditions on attendance. We cannot require anyone to sign in. We can't charge for attendance, but we can voluntarily ask people to sign in. That's okay. We do that. At least we did do that for public comment because it helped Amy with the record so that we could properly note who that comment was. And it can be helpful for the board when they're directing comments to staff, because then that staff member knows who to contact. We also must provide reasonable accommodations so that everyone may attend. Voting must now report how each individual official votes on any action and record the vote in the minutes, which is why Amy does such a good job for us of doing that. It used to be that you could just all say aye, but in 2014, that was changed so that votes could be more closely tracked. So again, on agendas, they must be posted in a location freely accessible to members of the public. I know for my own office, we recently gated around the building, and so we had to put up a specific glassed board for the posting of agendas because we came to realize that people couldn't get past the gate after 8 p.m., and so they did not have 24 hours access. We use the window at the front of the office, which is not behind the gate, so that's how we meet our requirement. We must state the time and place that the meeting will take place, as well as provide brief general descriptions of each item of business to be transacted or discussed, and that includes items to be discussed in closed session, because the goal is to give people enough information to know whether or not they should attend. We must also post our agendas on the WCS website, and as John shared earlier, we put up the agendas, and then we put up our board packets, and then the minutes, just for anyone who's watching at home, don't get posted until the following meeting, because minutes are not final until the board approves them, and we approve them the following month. Items not on the agenda. So no action can be taken if an item is not on the agenda, except when the majority of the board decides there's an emergency situation. It's very rare. Or 2/3 of the board members present, or all of less than the 2/3 are present, vote that an immediate action is needed, and it came to the board's attention after the agenda was posted. I've also never seen that one happen. This one happens fairly common now when an item appeared on the agenda of and was continued from a meeting held not more than 5 days earlier. In our current times, meetings, at least for my clients, are taking longer than they ever had before. So I have seen a couple times now where items were continued to 9 a.m. on the following morning. You've seen it with a couple school boards. Woodland Joint Unified recently used this because they had taken 6 hours of comment on their learning plan. Yes, I see, Sean, I see your face. So that meeting started at 5 p.m. They still needed to adopt a budget per law. So they switched from their educational plans at 12:15 a.m. in the morning, did their budget till 12:45, and then broke and resumed public comment the next morning at 9 a.m. And so luckily, I don't think we're in this situation or we'll have to use it, but it is a nice valve to have right now in terms of some of your more stressful, higher impactful board discussions. During public comment, we are allowed to briefly respond to statements or questions, and we may ask a commenter for clarification, and we may refer to staff for response during the meeting. And we can also ask staff to report back and or place it on a future agenda if that's necessary. You heard that tonight. It can be challenging to explain the idea that it needs to have been on the agenda to discuss it. So it's just a learning curve. So the public may address the board on matters on the agenda, and that's before or during consideration of the item for all meetings. And then at the beginning, right, on all other matters within the jurisdiction. You only have to do this, again, at regular meetings unless the board allows otherwise. We do have the practice of putting public comment on every agenda because if our public's coming and they want to hear it and participate with us, we obviously want to include them. Again, just remember that when the public comments, we are allowed to give a brief response, but that we can't take action. It can be rough because we cannot prohibit public criticism of WCS staff or this board, but personal attacks need not be permitted and rules must be followed. So basic decorum rules again, we have the right to stop a commenter once the attacks get to a certain level. And we should take public comment or must take public comment before action is taken. Reasonable time limitations and other regulations are permitted. The key, of course, is being consistent and fair. And remembering there is no right to a response from the board or its members. Disorderly conduct. So if a person willfully interrupts the meeting so as to make the orderly conduct of the meeting infeasible, the board president or executive director may cause their removal. If that is unsuccessful, the board president may order the room cleared and continue the session, except that any media present may remain. And we may readmit persons who are not responsible for the disruption. Lisa Kaplan, actually, I believe, was the one that taught me this, so Steve might remember better. You always know that a board meeting is a meeting held in public. It is not a public meeting. So it is appropriate to have rules of conduct and procedures in place so long as they are non-discriminatory in application. Records and public access. So the general rule is that agendas, minutes, and handouts distributed at board meetings are public records and are posted to the WCS website. So all documents pertaining to the agenda must be made available. And this includes handouts distributed to the board less than 72 hours prior to the meeting. An example would be tonight's handbook. And so once we receive that, any member of the public then would have been within their right to also request a copy. Similarly, any handouts provided the night of the meeting must also be available after the meeting.
Hope, just to chime in on that real quick, just for anybody who's still watching. To be clear, when something's distributed to our board, if it's placed in the board packet, and that board packet currently exists on the website, then it has been distributed. There's no need for anybody to request access.
Yes, sorry. Yes,
no,
excellent. But at the same time, if it's a handout, I don't know that they always make the folder.
Totally.
So if you see a handout, don't hesitate to ask. And if you're a member of the public and you're interested in seeing something and you need help getting directed to it, ask that too.
I guess I forgot about the days we actually handed things out because we saw each other in person. Yeah.
I know. I can't believe I haven't seen you since March. It's just whatever. I can go down the path.
I'm much taller.
I don't want to take forever on this because I know it's dry, but it's important. So closed sessions, if we meet specific exceptions to open meetings, we can hold a closed session. Most of you are aware of those already. It's not enough that it's sensitive, embarrassing, or controversial. Meetings are either open or closed. We cannot invite select members of the public into closed sessions. They are generally used to avoid revealing confidential information that would prejudice legal or negotiating positions of the body or compromise privacy interests of an employee. So for closed sessions, there's specific authority we have to use to do them, and we must list those on the agenda with a brief description. And luckily, the Brown Act supplies a series of fill-in-the-blank templates for agenda descriptions that provide a safe harbor from legal attacks. And then we must also report out on certain actions taken and the vote of each member present when necessary. And those required contents are those specified in Government Code Section 54957.1. We can keep a confidential minute book, but it's very unusual. That just depends on your district, on your different councils. Everyone feels differently about remembering those things. But those minutes would be open to the court in a lawsuit and in claims of open meeting violations. So you've got to balance it. Personnel closed sessions are for limited topics, and for us, it's the appointment, employment, evaluation of performance, discipline, or dismissal of the executive director, or to hear complaints or charges brought against the employee. We are restricted in discussing only particular employees and not general personnel policies or employee compensation in closed session. And then, while this would be exceedingly rare for us, given the fact that these would typically be settled at the staff level, if we were to be dealing with a disciplinary issue, we must give the employee subject to that disciplinary action 24 hours notice so that they know they have the right to a public meeting. And if we don't make that notice, any action we take with that employee would be void. Again, that has not happened in the 9 years I've been on this board, and it's very unlikely. Pending litigation closed sessions, Litigation's a pretty broad term, so it includes lawsuits, arbitration, administrative proceedings. For this particular board, administrative proceedings might what I categorize as the most likely, just because of different administrative law judge type hearings that we might have regarding, say, credentialing. They can be about existing litigation. So if it's existing litigation, we can discuss that with counsel. An example would be getting approval to settle a case. It can be for threatened litigation. So at that point, we'd ask legal counsel to come in and inform us about what our exposure is to litigation. And then it can be on our side of any potential litigation initiated by us. And that would be whether or not, it would be us seeking legal advice about whether or not initiating that litigation makes sense. Real estate closed sessions can be held to discuss the purchase, sale, exchange, or lease of specific real property by or for WCS. It must identify the negotiator and the real property involved. And the discussion must be limited to a focus on price and other terms of purchase or lease. Yeah, it's quite, because if they want most of that discussion to occur in public. So, like I had mentioned, not all decisions must be reported. An example would be if we'd reached a real estate agreement, if we had approval to initiate a lawsuit or to intervene in a lawsuit, if we were settling litigation. In that case, oftentimes it would be an actual agenda item where you would be approving a settlement agreement. Same for the real estate agreement, and actions affecting employee status. Some reports are not required until the issue is finalized. So once you've completely gone through an administrative process, then you would report it out. So it's really tracking where you're at in the whole process. And then if you were interested and want to do further reading, Open and Public 5 continues to have the specific requirements for each topic of the types of closed sessions. Now the fun part. So what happens if we happen to have a Brown Act violation? So there can be a civil action that can be brought by the district attorney or any interested person, and they may ask the court to stop violations, determine the applicability of the Brown Act to certain actions. They can compel us to begin taping our closed sessions. Part of that civil action could be invalidation. So any person may seek to invalidate an action that violates the Brown Act, but the board will always have its first chance to cure, and that's really the best opportunity under the Brown Act to address any issues. So if we were made aware of a failure to do something or an incomplete action, we could go back and fix it before we got too far down the process. The tricky part with the Brown Act and civil remedies is that someone who successfully invalidates an action or is able to enforce one of the Act's other remedies can seek court costs and attorney's fees, and really that's where this type of thing gets quite expensive. Luckily, though, as board members, the award would only be against WCS. It would not be against the person or board member who actually may have had that non-compliance issue. But before you get too optimistic, there is a criminal remedy for non-compliance, and that would depend on the act. If a board member took an action with the intent to deprive the public of information, you can be held guilty of a misdemeanor. Criminal complaints are solely within the district attorney's discretion to file. The specific requirements of that are a overt act, so the board or a board member must have participated in an action. So it's not just a deliberation or vote, but that sort of collection decision process. And there must have been a specific intent to deprive public of information, which the board knew or should have known the public was entitled. I personally have not seen this. Lisa Core has some good stories about it. The one just to keep in mind, right, is City of Bell. It's really what's led to a lot of this and sort of the idea of increasing one's compensation without fully disclosing what that means. Essentially, any of your conflict of interest issues that you don't disclose, I think is what's really money. It's always money. just focus on the money. If you're talking about money, just try to be as open as honest about it. Don't hide it anywhere. So that brings us to the end of this lovely presentation. Like I mentioned, I have included here a number of resources, including one, the statutes are from our own lawyers, Young, Minnie, and Core. You can always check out their website for more information. The California Attorney General published the Brown Act and open meetings for local legislative bodies. It's now very old, but not entirely out of date. And then Best and Creaker, a local law firm, has a summary of the major provisions that you can always feel free to read. So with that, you've done your yearly Brown Act training. So success, we have it done early. Which then brings us, does anyone have a question? I don't see any questions. Oh, Michelle, do you have a question? Oh, fine.
Slide 37.5.
It's hard to,
Good.
So at least we have proof of compliance. I teased Steve Korvik endlessly for all his words. I now have to take that all back. I will proudly say, though, I did shrink this slide from its slideshow from the original 33 down to 18 for you. So, you can thank me later. But
we also now have it on YouTube for next year. So
right, we'll play this.
We just watched the video.
Well, and that was the perk of having the slides done, right? Because I knew I'd have the slides next year now. Because, putting the work in to do them, it plays out. Hopefully there aren't too many changes to the Brown Act. And I don't mean to make light of it. I think the essential point that the public's work should be done in public is not one to not take seriously. Especially now as more and more local agencies are having to make calls and decisions that affect everyday life. Not that they weren't doing it before, but I know working for a county, I'm not sure anyone realized all the work we do with public health as an example until about, April 1st. Has been very interesting to watch evolve. And then the governor's order allowing us to meet this way has hugely changed the public's interaction with boards. And so the newest issue that we're seeing is people who are joining the call at 9 a.m. and then are commenting on every item because now they're sitting at home and they're able to listen. And you want public comment. It's great, but at my own board meeting on Tuesday, we had an hour and 15 minutes of public comment before we ever even got to an item. And so it's just super hard to balance it out. But every opinion matters. And I actually think in some ways this has brought out a great resource. I mean, John and I have talked about doing all our meetings this way. I didn't celebrate this, but I got a great compliment from one of our Westlake families who had watched our meetings and watched our last meeting and didn't realize the depth to which we discuss things. And so them having the opportunity to watch this meeting when they had time to do it was great, and they really appreciated it. And that it showed how much thought we put into things. And they knew we put thought into it, but to see our different personalities and the way we approach things, they didn't tell me, they told my husband, but still, it was nice to hear. And so, John and I have talked about, is there a way to continue, broadcasting these meetings, even if we do go back to meeting together, so that we do provide greater accessibility to our community to see the work we're doing in public. And the Brown Act really sort of, in a way, kind of made that very difficult before. So hopefully we'll see some solid legislative changes if they can ever come back together to talk about them. I know there's a number of statewide organizations currently taking in changes or suggested changes to the Brown Act as well as the Public Records Act, given what we've faced the last 4 months and are likely to face into the future. So with that, future agenda items for August. One of them will be board and executive director goals. We have not had time to prep those for you with everything else going on and knowing how likely they are to change and evolve right now. that hasn't necessarily been a focus I've really pushed. So I just want to acknowledge the board that we haven't forgot about them. There's just so many things on the plate right now that we will do them. They're going to be a little delayed this year, I think. We would typically vote on those now or in August. Anything else we can think of that we'll have in August? John, do you?
I'd like to bring back another high school report and kind of develop a calendar for the entire fall, but that's in the development.
Right. So that will bring us to reflection. I'll do the whip around.
Sorry, Hope, really.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Hope. Can I just ask you a question?
There you are.
Sorry. So you said, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my internet today. So goals are going to be a discussion point next month, or are they going to be voted on next month?
No. We'll have a full meeting to discuss them. What I'm basically saying is they are a future agenda item, and I don't know at what point in the future. They are future.
Okay, so not next month, future. Okay, I was just noodling for development, so.
It would be a good time. I mean, committees certainly should start thinking about what their goals are for the next year. I would encourage that discussion, but don't feel like the committee needs to report it back in August. Does that work, Nancy? You're breaking up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So I'll move on to reflection. I'm going to go in my reverse order, which means Vasa, you're first. And then Steve, if you want to play, you're after Vasa.
Hi, everybody. Well, I think I appreciate the whole night. I think as we're dealing with this crisis, it would be really easy for Westlake to push pause on celebrating not only our growth, but also moving forward with the high school. So I just thought it was really cool to celebrate our growth it's been a long time coming. I mean, this is my 8th year at Westlake, and I've seen, us add a class to finally have a full, complete school with 4 grades. When I started, I was an 8th grade teacher. We had 2 8th grade classes, and we had 3 and 4. So it's just cool to celebrate that, and then also the high school to still say, hey, we're moving forward, focusing on the things that make us Westlake. That's it.
Thanks, Vasa. Steve, and then Sean.
Yeah, I think I just celebrate the family handbook and the work that went into produce that. We know it's going to be nimble and flexible, and this is a draft mode, right, as we get it out there, but it's nice to have it based and guiding documents from SCOE and Sac County Public Health and other entities like that. We can begin to get some of that work out. So just a big thumbs up on that tonight.
Thanks, Steve. Sean, and then Shannon.
I would just like to thank Hope, who wears many hats, and we now get to see her attorney hat as she gave us our Brown Act training, which she's always said that she does them, but we've never had one from her, so that was kind of cool.
I wish I had time to put in my video clips of bad meetings, but with us broadcasting it, I went down this whole path of copyright. And would I actually be opening myself up to... So I didn't use images because I didn't want to accidentally steal one. I mean, I had quite the existential crisis about this presentation. So I will probably hand it back off to our lawyers in the future. But it worked out well for COVID times. Thank you, Sean. Shannon and Nancy.
I want to also celebrate the handbook, and because of that, again, I talk about my friend who teaches in the Bay Area a lot, and we've been having a lot of conversations lately because she does not feel comfortable going back to school, and so I've been talking about all the work we're doing, and so she actually hopped on and watched on YouTube for our whole reopening discussion tonight because she wanted to hear what was going on, and I don't do a good enough job explaining it, and so I was like, you should just get on. She was like, totally. And so anyway, I just want to celebrate that I am at least telling a slightly compelling enough story to get other people who are not in the area to join and watch.
That's
And
cool.
hopefully take some of that to our school and feel safer about it.
Love it.
Nancy, then Michelle.
Thanks again for my celebrations, echoing the school handbook. I feel so confident that we have a plan in place, and that just listening to even just within Natomas, I just feel like we have this great plan, a very solid plan that is solidly fluid. So appreciate that and all the work that the team has put into it, because everything changes from day to day. So I very much appreciate the work, and again, being part of the organization without having to put in necessarily the work into it, it makes me feel really good.
Great. We're gonna put solidly fluid right on the front page. We love it.
Yeah, it's right up there with my selfish vector. I'm going to have to remember that, because selfish vector is my favorite Newsom term of art lately. Sorry. I have it written down as sticky because I loved it so much. Michelle and then Josh.
Similar, just super happy about the handbook, but even more so than that, the transparency in all of the planning efforts and how we're thinking about flexing up and down and so forth. I will just say I'm going to celebrate. I texted 3 families while that presentation was happening, and all 3 watched. And all 3 also commented about how thoughtful this board was being. And so kudos to everyone and John and your team.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, the access right now is amazing. Like, it's actually, that part of it couldn't be beat, right?
I love being
in
on
terms
YouTube.
of our families being able to watch and participate.
Yeah.
Josh and then John.
I'm just going to reiterate what a lot of people have said. John, you and your team put a lot of thought and effort into that return to school handbook, and I think you produced a great product. I think it's a good thing, and I think it's going to hopefully ease a lot of people's minds. And I want to thank Hope for taking on the whole Brown Act herself and not just having us go around in a circle and each read one slide and then pass to the next person.
Next year, it's happening. You all know it well enough to do it. I will not forget this, Josh Carell. I will not forget. I have brain of steel. Next year, it's on you. You'll see. John and then Jed.
Yeah, I just like, we talk about reflections of positive. Really the strength of this board. We've come a long way together as a board. We're at this place where I think when we leave these meetings, we really leave with one voice. And so you're kind of collectively being part of this process this summer and getting to this place where I feel like our staff is empowered to execute on the plan is incredibly important. There's going to be disappointed and unhappy and frustrated people as we go forward, because this is a challenging time. But to know that this board kind of stood shoulder to shoulder tonight and said, yeah, we believe in this plan. So it's a real highlight for me. So thank you for your support and for all of it. And Hope, I thought you crushed it, and I don't think you should give it back to anybody else next year. I love the Brown Act training on our Westlake slide template. I think it's awesome. But yeah, thank you everybody for the support tonight.
I like that too. Though when I built it, just to be clear, and we'll have to take it out, I didn't have the advance. I just went from slide to slide. So I should have had Megan look at it, because I obviously, that was weird. But it's okay. It's a work in progress. Sorry for that turn. Jed, then Ashley.
I was happy to know that Shannon is working on racial equity ideas for us. And, I think our conversation here is like 99% COVID and 1% Floyd. And I think elsewhere in the world, it's not that same mix. So, we'll probably find time to come back and talk about some of the Floyd issues with greater seriousness, given what Shannon's doing. So I'm happy to hear about that.
Yeah, that was a great meeting.
Ashley, and then Amy, if you want in.
I'm going to acknowledge Vasa, because being the V instead of the A, like being at the end of the alphabet, you really have to dig deep when everybody's taken the good celebration. So I would say ditto, but I've been sitting here thinking, like, what else is there to celebrate instead of a ditto? And I think we should celebrate our base staff who's starting back at work Monday. Is that the right math? And like all of the attendance. I was trying to add up. I think like we have the biggest audience that we can't see today ever, based on all the comments of friends and family and people who are watching, which is something to really celebrate.
Agreed. Miss Amy, do you want to play?
Sure. I agree with John. It always is good to know that when we finish out this meeting, when we come back to work tomorrow morning, that we know we've got the board's support, and that we can put our best, worst, first thoughts out there, I think is John's term. Give me your best, worst, first thoughts. And we get good feedback from the board, and we get your support, and that means a lot. It makes it a lot easier to do what we have to do.
And then let's see. I would just like to reflect on what I think is really cool is, John, the years you've been here, you've built such a culture. And I think you see that in our meetings through our trust and support of the processes and teams we've put into place to do this work. I mean, there's a time in my history on this board where this discussion would have been a lot more contentious, and instead it felt supportive and prepared for, and everyone was able to give their unique spin and comment on it. And I just really appreciate that and wanted to take a second to reflect on how far the organization has come. We don't talk about going from I'm going to get it wrong. We don't talk about it anymore. But from striving to thriving, and I think you see us getting so close to the thriving now, and this meeting really proves that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, team.
And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:42. And if I don't see you before then, August 13th.
All right.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.